So welcome to the third day of broadcasting here from COP29 in Baku, the UN Climate Conference taking place in Azerbaijan. And welcome also to my colleague Katerina Rolsdottir-Jansen, who's arrived here on the Caspian Sea to be with us for the rest of this show and next week. So fantastic.
It's great to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the sessions today, especially one if I can single them out. The first one is about how data centers can actually help create sustainable cities, and the second one is about how we make sure that the labor force, the workforce, is ready for this green transition. So this is really exciting. Of course, we continue with the methane.
Yes, absolutely. I'm also looking forward to this day as well, because we're carrying on with the methane show, the BuyMoreTime show, and other short-lived climate pollutants. Ingmar Renshag, the CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time. Why is this all so important?
Methane is important because the difference between methane and other short-lived climate gases compared to the big problem, carbon dioxide, the short-lived climate gases are only up in the atmosphere for a couple of years compared to carbon dioxide that will stay for up to thousands of years. This means that we don't need to remove short-lived climate gases to get an effect on the global warming where we can lower the temperature. We just need to stop releasing them, and that's why we have a campaign here at this COP that is called BuyMoreTime, and you can go into wedon'time.org/BuyMoreTime, read a letter you can sign that will be sent to your country's UN ambassadors, and what we're advocating for is to create a Montreal protocol, something similar that we used to actually heal the planet for the ozone crisis. Create something similar for those short-lived climate gases. Doesn't mean that we should stop doing everything we can to stop the carbon dioxide and the fossil fuel phase out and all that.
Exactly.
But it means that we get more time to do everything right, and we can avoid those tipping points. So this is a great solutions that we need in order to fight the climate crisis and win.
Yeah, as the British minister here responsible for climate said, the methane and the short-liveds are a sprint?
Yeah, so we need to do the short-lived climate gases. We need to get rid of them. That's a sprint, but we also need to run a marathon, and that's everything else we need to do in order to become sustainable.
Right, and we're having another daily show today. We're having a daily show every day on this topic, looking at different aspects, Ingmar. Yeah?
Yes, we have.
Okay, super.
And we have lots of great guests visiting our studio here. In the studio also we have a roaming reporter and cameraman catching people on the fly here at the climate negotiations. And yesterday we were able to get an interview with Bolivia's foreign minister, Celinda Sosa Lunda. Let's take a look at this interview.
Okay, bye. So we're really excited to have the Minister of the Foreign Affairs of the government of Bolivia and the head of the delegation here at COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, who has an amazing announcement that has come out concerning forests in Bolivia and a very unique form of investment to help this country's forests survive over the coming decades and centuries. This is a new form of investment in your country that could generate up to $5 billion for investment in your forests. Is that correct?
So, para ser más exacto, este nuevo proceso puede generar hasta $5 billones para invertir en los bosques de Bolivia, ¿sí?
Si estamos conscientes, nosotros consideramos que este plan de emergencia que va a implementar el gobierno es un plan ambicioso porque queremos realmente ir a recuperar la fauna y la flora, que realmente hemos perdido muchos millones de árboles. Entonces, para nosotros el manejo de un plan forestal y que nos permita reducir las emisiones de carbono, es por eso que queremos usar esta plataforma del SADAR, que nos dará precisiones, el 100% de cuánto de carbono vamos a reducir, vamos a medir lo que existe sobre todo en la Amazonía boliviana, que todavía se constituye uno de los pulmones más importantes para Bolivia, y es por eso importante para nosotros trabajar en esta línea y la decisión que ha tomado el gobierno nacional.
So this is about this, obviously, but this is also about protecting the fauna and the flora of Bolivia, bringing back all these trees, the millions of trees that have been burned during forest fire in Bolivia, which is still one of the main lungs of our planet, and protecting the communities as well.
Por eso consideramos de que este encuentro, esta cumbre del COVID, la cumbre del cambio climático, tiene que ser para acciones prácticas, para acciones rápidas, porque esta crisis no puede esperar que sigamos generando más burocracia, sino que las alianzas estratégicas de inversionistas de los países tenga que ser muy efectivo en los países en desarrollo. Y es por eso que Bolivia, nosotros esperamos realmente la cooperación de todas aquellas empresas, instituciones, personas y gobiernos, para que de manera conjunta podamos realmente, no sé si vamos a revertir, pero sí mitigar lo que son los efectos del cambio climático, y sobre todo en acciones de resiliencia.
And for Bolivia, COP is not only about words, it's about proper action, real solution, and that's what they see with this new project. And because they think we don't have time actually to wait, and that we need to bring everyone together, the state actors, the people doing investment, and civil society all together, and take action.
Tell us just very briefly, so what is special about this financial instrument connected with this sum of $5 billion?
This is a one-of-a-kind. This is the first large-scale sovereign carbon transaction that will be issued as a security. So it will be regulated in the US market, and it will appear and be allowed to be on people's balance sheets in a different fashion, and a fashion that will make it very attractive to hold for the investor.
And what kind of people might be purchasing this security?
You've got 2 or 3 types of people. So the main types of people will be the emitters, people who need to extinguish carbon that they put into the atmosphere, or investors who see this as a potential investment trade where they can generate a return from it over a period of time.
And a last question then to the Minister. This way of financially supporting Bolivia from polluters in other parts of the world could be a new opportunity for many developing countries.
Piensa que este nuevo proyecto puede ser un formato que puede ser implementado en otros países en desarrollado o desarrollado.
Bueno, nosotros estamos ahora conociendo a través de los representantes de la CONIC, es una plataforma, es una herramienta que realmente nos va a permitir poder usar lo que es en el tema de la implementación de este plan de forestación y la medición de la emisión de los gases de carbono. Con toda seguridad que vamos a buscar otras experiencias que se hayan implementado también en otros países, ¿no? Porque consideramos que todas aquellas experiencias avanzadas pueden ser muy valiosas para nuestros procesos. No siempre hay que inventar cada vez que podamos la pólvora, contar con las experiencias que existen también.
She thinks that yes, it can be a project that can be implemented by other developing countries, but as well that they can take from other experience, because you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Most of the solutions are already there, and this is something they can be inspired from as well in terms of finance.
So methane, of course, is a more powerful heating gas than carbon dioxide, but it's also short-lived. And that presents an opportunity. If we can cut methane big time, we may be able to roll back some of the warming that climate has already experienced. And this might buy us a little bit more time to get the full decarbonization into a higher speed. Cutting methane will take huge amounts of international cooperation, but it wouldn't be unprecedented. In 1987, the world united behind the Montreal Protocol to phase out chemicals that were destroying the ozone layer. And it was a great success. 99% of ozone-depleting substances have been eliminated, and the ozone layer is now healing. So would it be a good idea to have a similar protocol for methane? It's an idea that we don't have time with others are floating at this COP, and we'll see whether it flies or not. With us in the studio today to talk about the topic of regulation are three marvelous guests. We have with us Dr. Nruka Madueke. Okay, thank you very much. We were struggling with that name a little bit. And she's Director General and Chief Executive Officer of the National Council on Climate Change in Nigeria. We have Tibor Stelbarski, Principal Advisor on Energy Diplomacy at EEAS, and you might have to clear up what that is in a second. And Martina Otto is Head of the Secretariat at the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, the United Nations Environment Programme. So let me just say briefly, we were expecting to have also the Canadian climate envoy, Catherine Stewart, with us, but the Minister for Environment of Canada has had to go back today. I don't know why. So Catherine is now basically having to do two jobs. So she will join the show actually on the 21st of November. But we wanted Canada on as well because they also have adopted regulations, and this is the important topic of today. Okay, first up, I'd like to introduce Tibor. And what does EES or EESS or whatever stand for?
EEAS, the European External Action Service.
Ah.
This is one of the institutions of the EU. We tend to say that this is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the EU.
Ah,
but
okay.
in practice, this is really a service to all the institutions, European Commission, European Parliament, the Council President, European Council President, and the member states as well, to focusing on the external dimension, external relation of all the EU policies.
Okay, I've got it. Thanks very much. It was a new one to me, but that one can't know every acronym, so that's fantastic. I'm just going to ask the tech team just to turn up the microphone here in the studio just a little bit of the guests so we can hear things a little bit clearer. But Tibor, let's now dig into the topic of regulation. The European Union has agreed regulations on methane in May this year. And whereas a country like Canada or Nigeria or the USA or even the host country here, Azerbaijan of COP29, are what you might call producers of fossil fuel products like methane, the EU is kind of overall more an importer. And so these regulations are a little bit different to say what Canada or the US has, right? Tell us what's special about these new regulations.
Yes, indeed. The starting point is that the EU is importing oil, gas, and also to some extent coal as well. So the domestic production is rather limited, not minor, but it's limited more, as you mentioned. Almost 90% of this energy supply is imported from third countries. So the philosophy of the regulation is that to have rules for the domestic producers and any actors in related to the gas and oil sector, but also extent is to the importers, so for third countries. Not so much to put a kind of target on emission reductions or something like this, but more first to create transparency in the oil and gas production, including the coal as well. How to do this? First, the regulation says that the producers within the EU, but also in third countries who are delivering to the EU, they need to provide data on the methane emission of the production. And based on this data, there will be a database in the European Commission, and it will be possible to establish country profiles that from methane emission point of view, what is the situation in different exporting countries. And then as a next step, in Europe, we have a very sophisticated monitoring, reporting, and validation, verification method, the so-called MRV. And this will be extended also from 2027 to importers as well. So they have to demonstrate that the producers, the exporters, they are subject the same MRV rules as it is within Europe. And as a next step, from 28, they also need to report the methane emission intensity. And from 2030, there will be a maximum level set by the European Commission on the methane emission intensity within the Europe and also for exporters. So as you see, it's not so much on a kind of restricting a target and then to force a target, because it's quite difficult in such a complex and diverse market like the oil and gas producers, but more to encourage them to share the data. If the data is there, then the market is transparent, and then the buyers, like the European Union, can decide to encourage and to move towards the cleaner and greener producers. So that's the aim, that it's using the power of the EU, that this is a buyer and a premium buyer in the world, encourage exporting countries to move into the direction that the methane emission is reducing over the time.
Right. Stay with us, Tibor, because we can dig a little bit later in the second 15 minutes into that. So wonderful that we've got this fantastic lady here from Nigeria. And you are either working on or you have methane regulations. Tell us a little bit about this journey and what was the purpose of it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here and have this conversation. So Nigeria started this journey in 2016, where we signed up to the World Bank net zero on methane, basically. And so going forward to that, very closely back to back, from 2021, 22 and 23, what we've been able to develop is guidelines for the midstream and downstream petroleum sector that tells operators where to reduce methane emissions along the supply chain. As you are aware, we're oil and gas country. Fossil fuel basically is one of our main exports, means of income. But for us, we've come to understand that if we are going to reduce carbon emissions, we have to be able to reduce carbon emissions, methane emissions from the oil and gas sector. And so that's why that guideline is there. We also have a regulation as well for the upstream petroleum operators as well. And then very important, as at 2023, we have we amended the regulation on gas flaring and venting. We added methane, because that is very important for us as well as a country to say that we have to be able to regulate methane at source. So we're not just going to penalize you for gas venting or gas flaring, but also methane emissions. And so that's what we've done in 2023. Going forward again, because we've come to understand that capacity building is very important, you have to build the capacity of the regulators to understand what they need to regulate, because you have the regulations, but like I've said to Martina, implementation is very crucial, right? It has to have a bite. So we have to train them to know this. So what we're doing in collaboration with UNEP and also CCAC and and the EU as well. We have a program called NIMERP. Basically, is a program that builds the capacity of the regulators for the oil and gas, waste and agriculture, because oil and gas is not just the only place where you get the methane emissions. And then very recently as well, and we're very happy, Nigeria is very happy to be the country to announce this this new move by CCAC, where you have the fossil fuel regulatory program to help design regulations for clean air. I know we're talking methane, But again, black carbon is very essential.
Yes.
And like I've shared as well, one of the issues challenges we're having is black carbon. So you have to bring this conversation out there. And so that's why I'm happy we're having this dialogue.
Fantastic. So just for the viewers out there, we've never on the shows talking about short-lived climate plumes mentioned black carbon this week, but now it's on the table, and it's I know a little bit about it, but we'd have to talk about that over a good cup of coffee. But black carbon is a super pollutant as well, and also it's bad for your health, and it also drops on the ice when it goes around the world and melts the ice a bit faster. So it's another one that we all have to watch. Yeah, big time.
Sorry, I don't know if it's okay to add, but I just wanted to say that why is it essential you talk about black carbon?
Yeah.
You're talking about the health, yes, methane.
Yeah.
You're also talking about the health of the people. That's the same thing again for methane.
Yeah.
But again, for us as a country, there's a city called Port Harcourt. And I know I shared that very personal story. My family had to move from Port Harcourt to Lagos. Why? Because my nephews had to deal with the black carbon. You come to your house, and on the top of the table, you can just touch it, and it's black.
Wow.
Basically. So these are real life issues we're dealing with as people, and you end up with people being very sick, children as well. We're talking about the vulnerables, women, elderly, and of course persons living with disabilities. So that's why this conversation is very essential.
So probably better to capture the carbon and use it as a fuel than flare it, actually, ideally. Yes, interesting thought. All right, Martina, the United Nations Environment Programme's or the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, hosted by the United Nations Environment Programme, to get it technically correct, is working with other countries to try and build capacity and help draft regulations and guide and provide support. How many countries currently have you been or are you working on?
Well, that's a really good question. Quite a few, because if you take it sector by sector, so we heard quite a bit about the fossil fuel side now, but obviously there's also regulation on waste, there's regulation on the agricultural sector. So we've been supporting quite a few. And if we talk about fossil fuels, we've had obviously the longer term support with Nigeria, but also Colombia, for example. We've done work with Mexico in the past, and we've set up this new fossil fuel regulatory program to really put the emphasis on the fact that regulation is critical to make sure that the companies that are involved in this are putting the resources into methane capture, so avoiding the venting, flaring, and leakage as a way forward, because other things give you more profit than capturing the methane, although it's a profitable activity, and that's why the regulation is so important and comes in. So that was the key signal to say this is important to have regulation. We'll help 20 countries going forward on this, and we have the first cohort already, and that's Iraq, Kazakhstan, and Ghana.
Right. Okay. Marvelous. So let's think about this a little bit more. I mean, I said this yesterday when we had, I think it was the United States State Department on. I did ask, actually, for some of our shows to have some representatives from the oil and gas industry join us, but although they were very friendly, they said it's all a bit too early for them right now. And I wonder whether it's because actually the monitoring of this methane is really ramping up right now, isn't it? With this methane sat, and there's also legions of NGOs with handheld ones that monitor methane leaks, and we heard it from a lady in Texas who does that. So we're moving into a new era of transparency, accountability perhaps on this topic. And are people now looking at the sums and saying, actually, we're now seeing a lot more methane than we thought. Okay, what do we do about this? Is that your sense that the industry is responding or is aware that it needs to do something, but it's maybe a bit shocked by the amount of methane that's actually coming out? Or how do we interpret this? I don't know. Yeah?
Okay. I'll say that for us as a country, one of the things, again, that program is doing is, like I've said earlier, which is to train the regulators. And I'm happy to say this, right? You need to have investment to be able to get those technologies. And as an African country, we're saying bring that investment, give us that finance to help us to build those, to have that technology, to have those infrastructure that you need to be able to detect the methane. These are very expensive things, right? So the regulators on one hand, but how do you equip them? So that is a question I'm going to throw out. How do you equip them? So it's very necessary to equip. The oil companies will not give you those equipments. You have to have those equipments yourselves. And so, yes, we want to do this, but then can we get support to be able to do it and do it effectively?
Right, good point.
Maybe on the industry, as you, I think, also mentioned in your introductory words, that the bad news is that methane is much more harmful than, for example, the CO2. So it's really 20 times more harmful and cause almost 25% of all greenhouse gas problems in the world. The good news is that at least on the energy, this is relatively easily and relatively cheap way can be handled. And I think that's the industry which also recognize that if it's not just part of the whole business model that producing, exploring oil, gas, and then to sell it in the world, but to look at these leakages and monitoring the flaring and other activities, then it can be in relatively low cost or even no net cost handle this situation. So it can give a very good contribution from country or for the company side as well. That's why, for example, this OMGDP 2.0 is companies are ready to go for this because they see that this is, as we say, this is a kind of low-hanging fruit to do. That's why we think that it's so important to have the data and to have the monitoring, reporting and the verification, because if we know that what is the situation, then we can react on this and we can help also, we can, for example, to prevent these so-called super pollutant events when it's very suddenly a lot of methane is in the emitted, and if we have this system on the monitoring, then it can be much easier to prevent. And then the result will be that the methane emission will hopefully sooner than later will decrease indeed.
Maybe if I can comment quickly on the companies, because I think back to the days when we started oil and gas methane partnership. So that's the OGMP. Now there's a 2.0. It's the second version, the evolution of it. But when we started it, it was really the idea to say, can we hold the companies more accountable? Can we ask them to actually detect where the leakages and so on are at the asset level? And we started with this methodology, that was 2014 or 2015. And we started with a handful, basically. And it's all the oil majors, because obviously there's a reputational risk as well, and that made them move. But they were very, very careful to get involved in it, because they said, well, once it's out, we have to do something about it. And only doing it for one asset doesn't suffice. We have to do it for all our assets. And there is a real issue behind it. And that was the oil majors. Now going to the national oil companies, that's yet a different story. And I think, and if we talk about the capacity, that's where the difference comes in as well. That's why we do make a bit of a distinction on it.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, if you don't mind, that as you are aware as well, there's a UNEP Mars observatory anyway that gives a satellite overview of methane emissions.
Yes.
So that's also some of the things that we're using, sort of like a low-hanging fruit for us to be able to detect this. Yes, we may not have that capacity yet, but this is an instrument that has been given. It's free, you don't pay for it. And so we're also using that as well to help us to detect the levels of methane that we have before you then can now come on ground and put in place those measurement systems in the infrastructure itself and at the rigs and all that, which is very important. But again, when you have a combination of the satellite and the physical, you're able to get accurate readings. So that's where we're going to.
Absolutely. And then there's this new one, Methane Sat, I think, which is what Environmental Defence Fund, New Zealand government, and blah blah blah. So things are really growing, aren't they? I wondered on the regulations whether there was already a sense of what is a good regulation. In other words, are there different regulations popping up all over the place, and then we end up with a kind of in English you say a dog's dinner of regulations, but I don't know how to explain that to anybody who's not English. But you know, kind of messy. Or is there some harmonization of these emerging regulations where everybody buys into some common standards? Otherwise, you get loopholes, right? That's the point.
Yeah, well, there's loopholes, but there's also taking into account the different contexts, and obviously what we've seen with the EU saying, well, we're mostly an importer, so let's use market force that we have, our market power, and that's how that regulation came into play. If you look at the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, to put a price, a fee on methane, that was a way to drive things for a producing country. And there's a guidance out there and that we will use in the fossil fuel regulatory program by the IEA. Actually, there's a typology of what to look at. And there's a number of things, how to reduce the venting and flaring, the leakages and so on. And that's something we will use, but we will always have to take into account the context.
On the EU regulations, I'm just curious, is it just oil and gas industry, these regulations, or do they cover other methane?
It's energy, so oil, gas, and coal.
Okay.
So these are the three.
Ah,
but
interesting.
Also, and
coal.
coal as well. Yeah.
All right.
And everything which is, related to this. So also the storage facilities, also the grid, the transmission system, the pipelines and others. So everything also in the, not just the production, but also which relates to the energy, the fossil fuels.
So Tibor, it's interesting on the coal, and we have a coal show tomorrow actually with some experts on coal methane, and some of the amounts of methane coming out of coal mines, even in Europe, are simply eye-watering. I saw the numbers for Canada, which, if I get them right, the methane coming out of coal mines in Canada almost dwarfs the greenhouse gas emissions from cars and buildings, and I mean, but I understand that also the reporting of coal methane has not necessarily been at its most ambitious, if I can say, from nation states to the UNFCCC. But that's very interesting that you're looking at coal methane. I was going to ask you that specific question, but I made it broader.
Yeah, no, it will be not part of it. So it will be the obligation, the same for the coal mines to report. This methane emission.
In Australia now they have this carbon price that all the coal mines are going to have to pay penalties of $35 a tonne if they don't reduce their methane, which seems to now bringing in the industry that gets rid of the leaks of methane, or actually they're intentional, aren't they, because they have to vent their coal mines to avoid explosions. You can't actually collect the methane, I don't think. But sorry.
But Nick, if I could come in on the question, the broadening it out. I mean, on fossil fuels, we have to have the strong regulation because I mean it's really otherwise how is the sector to move? But for the waste sector and for the agricultural sector, things are a little more tricky, and we're starting to see more coming online. And in a few days, on Tuesday, actually, there will be the declaration that is chaperoned by the COP presidency this year on organic waste, reducing organic waste. And one of the areas there will be a focus on regulation. So landfill regulation, how to go about that, regulation to reduce the organic waste to go into landfills in the first place. How do we take, for example, an issue like food waste with regulation on best before days and so on. So there's a whole universe out there how we can move the needle on the waste sector with an interaction to the agricultural sector, which obviously is more sensitive.
But the key is a little bit what you alluded to, Tibor, and I know you're fully aware of as well, which is there has to come some moment that when you've got the best regulations in the world and encouraging the oil and gas industry, because some people have been trying to encourage the oil and gas industry well before Paris on CO2, for example, that there has to come a point where we say, well, no, I'm sorry, you're not playing the game, right? For the last 12 months, the satellites say your oil operations are bursting with methane and nothing seems to have changed, right? So there has to be the carrot, but there must be a stick somewhere on the horizon, on the radar. What do you think?
What I was going to say is that, again, you have to balance it. There has to be a bit of balance, and that's where the carbon market comes in as well. I believe so, because where you get them to, you have for us as a country, we have the regulations, like I've said to you, and we're saying to them, we are going to hold you accountable, even down to the operations, even down straight from your exploration, straight to the downstream and all that. We've been able to articulate it very clearly and to say to them. But in addition to that, I see opportunity for the carbon market in these conversations, so that you are not very, in as much as you want that change, but it's also possible to be able to take them and make that change happen, right? And I cannot oversay this, which is the fact that you have to be able to equip the regulators. It's so much as having the law, but the people who are going to implement that law, they need to know what it is about, and they need to have the capacity to be able to implement it. That, for me, is where the gap is.
Yeah.
It's not whether you have a strong law or a soft law. It is who is going to implement this law. Do they have the capacity to implement it? Do they have the tools to implement it? For me, that is where the focus should be.
You can have a speed limit on a road that everybody's breaking, and it doesn't matter if there are no policemen to stop them and give them a ticket, right? So
enforcement. It has to be someone's job.
Tibor, what do you think?
Yes. Also in the methane regulation, there are sanctions, so penalty. If producers is not fulfilling the obligations, then the national authority can put a penalty on these producers. But the aim is not to arrive at that point. As you see from these deadlines, what I mentioned, 25, 27, 28, 30, is really to encourage the market and the producers to be prepared. And if they have this MRV system, if they have this leakage detection and repair solutions, then it will move toward the industry the cleaner and the greener way. And then as a market, European market, as a premium market, will give a premium for this. So it will be an interest of these companies to do the greening and the cleaning.
I think we're going to have to leave it there. We're right up on the mark. We're 2 seconds over, but we did pretty good. Thank you very much. It was a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much for coming here from Nigeria, from the European Union as well, and Martina, of course. There's a whole universe of this story out there, but I think it was a good glimpse into the regulation and the challenges, of course, but also the opportunities here. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we are. I thought it was getting serious, but then he posted this story like 5 minutes ago.
Weird.
That's so toxic. Like, who is she? Is she one of his friends? He's never mentioned her. Who is she?
I don't feel so good.
Cities are the lifeblood of our economy, housing 50% of the population and generating 80% of GDP. But they also account for over 70% of global carbon emissions. By 2050, 70% of people will live in cities, pressuring energy infrastructures to evolve. This is a daunting challenge, but there is a silver lining: energy efficiency. Tried and tested solutions that have been operational for decades. Now it's time we implement these solutions at scale. We're at the cusp of one of the biggest energy transformations of our time, doable only through cooperation at an unprecedented level. But it can be done. Join us in building the resilient cities of tomorrow. Today.
Welcome. Cities consumes 2/3 of global energy and 70% of the global carbon emissions. And this will only increase by urbanization. To meet our climate targets, we not only need to reduce our carbon emissions, we also have to work on increasing energy efficiency to lower the energy demand itself. And there is a significant untapped potential when it comes to energy efficiency. For example, in the United States, almost 70% of the energy that is being produced is currently wasted. And this is a fantastic opportunity.
Reusing wasted energy will also bring other benefits, such as lowering the energy bills of consumers and companies, creating new jobs, and increasing energy security and resilience. The time for action is now. Why? And it's very simple. The world's demand for energy is rising, not falling. Right now, in some regions of the world, on a hot day when you blast your air conditioner and start the vacuum cleaner at the same time, lights are going to start blinking unless we act. It's time to stop wasting and time to make use of our valuable energy.
Correct. And during last year's COP28 in Dubai, the world's leaders historically agreed on a global pledge to double the rate of energy efficiency improvements by 2030. So far, according to the latest analysis from the International Energy Agency, we are far from on track. Last year, we have went from 2% improvement to 1% improvement, and we need to go to 4%.
The current finance models for cities are also not that helpful. Some call it a patchwork, others simply call it messy. We need to find a streamlined financing model to make this happen at scale and on time.
And there is also a new challenge on the horizon. The exponential growth of artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and also our streaming services is making an increase in data center demand all over the world. And these data centers are also consuming large amount of energy that increase the demand for energy in the world even more. In addition to that, 90% of the energy that data centers consumes is actually today being wasted.
Madeleine, you mentioned earlier about the wasted energy in the United States, but let me say that today in Europe alone, almost 3,000 terawatts of heat is wasted every year, disappearing into thin air or being released into our rivers. This waste heat is equal to almost the EU's total energy demand for heat and hot water. Luckily, these problems can be turned into solutions.
Absolutely.
This waste heat can be reused to heat our buildings and our cities, and thanks to new technologies, it can also be turned into cooling.
So in this session today, we're going to hear about all of these solutions of how we can recover the excess heat from data centers, but also industries, in order to accelerate the city's net zero transitions. First, we will focus in on the government and policy sessions. And with us to do that, I have a fantastic guest with me here in the studio. We will first have Thomas Spencer, the analyst at the International Energy Agency, also Directorate for Sustainability, Technology and Outlooks. With us here, we also have Mattias Frumery, our Chief Ambassador for Swedish Minister of Climate and Enterprise, and also our Chief Negotiator here at COP. And with us digitally at Zoom, we also have Katrin Skärfeldt-Jamet, ICLEI Global President and Chair of Sustainable, Circular and Innovation Procurement Portfolio in the ICLEI Global Executive Committee. And Katrin, you're also the Mayor of Malmö, which is the third largest city in Sweden. So Katrin, if we start with you, Malmö is one of the 112 net zero cities in Europe. Where is Malmö right now on this journey? And is there any learnings from other cities that you can share with us?
Thank you. I really appreciate to be part of this panel. I'm representing Malmö, and we have been working very hard for a couple of decades. And we have lowered our greenhouse gas emissions by 50%. And this can be compared with the level of emissions in Sweden that has been lowered by 38%. And I'm proud to say that last year we reached the same level as 2020, which was a year when the COVID pandemic made us unable to travel like we do a normal year. So I would say that we made a step further ahead. We have been working really hard with different kind of climate city contracts since 2021, which means that we cooperate with lots of different actors. Like we signed more than 50 different climate city contracts involving more than 600 actors with ambition to reach the targets together. And it's just to give you some examples, we have actors from within the construction sector, real estate companies, actors within the sector of water, waste management, energy, but also restaurants and our local football club and educational institutions. So I think the way we're working is to connect all different actors to make sure that we make improvements together.
That's fantastic.
We have been part of global networks for quite a long time, and we're working together with the other net zero cities in Europe and in Sweden, in Viable Cities, for example, and within ICLAIB, for example, just to give each other our best practices and share solutions and work together.
So fantastic to hear that it's partnerships and collaborations across all different actors that is the key to really accelerate the city's perspective. So Katrin, you're also the board of directors of ICLAIB, where you also represent 2,600 cities and local government. Can you tell us a little bit more about what ICLAIB is doing and how you are driving this transition?
Well, we are a global network, and we connect 2,600 towns, cities, and regions with ambitions when it comes to sustainability. And well, we are, as I said before, when it comes to Malmö, we are sharing our best practices, and we are trying to inspire each other, and we're working to fund different projects and to give the local level a strong voice. It's both when it comes to the green transition, but also when it comes to different initiatives when it comes to climate adaptation, for example. And since 70% of the global greenhouse gas emissions stem from urban areas, we work really hard to give the cities and the regions a strong voice globally and nationally to make sure that our needs are met in a better way so that we are actually able to deliver the work that has to be done locally. So this is a way to connect cities from all over the world. We are struggling with the same kind of questions, but different circumstances, of course, but we are really working hard together.
And you feel we're making the right progress from a city perspective?
I think we can see that we have lots of cities that actually address the work and that they are recognizing that they need to do more, and they are willing to do more, but they lack resources. And quite often when I talk to my colleagues, they have lots of they would like to do more, but need to collaborate more with the national government, for example, and they really need to have some help to address their issues. So it's about policy making, and it's about financing. It's a huge issue, but I think more and more people do address and recognize that we can't deliver the Paris Agreement, the goals within the Paris Agreement, if we don't bring the local actors to the tables and reach some, so that they reach more funding.
Absolutely. So I want to connect back to COP28 because ICLEI was also part of the Coalition for High Ambition Multi-Level Partnership for Climate Action. Can you also tell us a little bit about this initiative and what is it that you try to achieve?
Well, the goal of CHAMP is to help nations to achieve the Paris Agreement goals by working with local and other subnational governments for planning, financing and implementing climate strategies and actions. And this pledge shows that leaders at every level are working together to solve climate crisis. So we are actually working to connect the local and regional level to the national level. And I think as we speak, we had 74 nations signing this pledge, and I think this is a good start, but we need more nations to sign and start to collaborate with the local level.
Yes. Thank you, Katrine. I think that is a good handover also to Matthias, who sits with us. I mean, you have been involved in the UN's negotiation process for quite some time. How can these international processes that you are part of fast forwarding these energy efficiency solutions and also bring in the city perspective?
Thanks. I'd like to pick up on 2 points which you raised also in your introduction. Firstly, you mentioned the solutions, and I think that's really key to highlight the solutions which are available. That provides and gives confidence to policymakers that they can set higher targets, but also the kind of targets we set last year at COP28, when we agreed not only to double energy efficiency by 2030, but also to triple renewable energy and transition away from fossil fuels in energy systems. So setting those kind of global targets, as well as having the solutions available, I think that the challenge for us now and the opportunity for us is really sort of to bring those two tracks together, the kind of goals we're setting at the global level to make sure that they can be implemented at a national and of course a local level as well, building on the kind of solutions that so many actors around here have available. So sort of to make sure that the voices are heard, that the solutions are out there and then can be applied into policy making.
And how can we do that? How do we bring that together? Because that's the key point.
I think having conversations like this, making sure that these kind of voices are heard. I've had the multiple various conversations that I've had with industry leaders here, just here at COP29. I think it's very clear to me that what business actors are looking for is clarity in policy signals from occasions like these. So for us, from the Swedish and the EU side, what we want to see coming out from COP29 is a confirmation of the kind of targets we set last year at COP28 and ensure further clarity in terms of how they will be implemented. And of course, next year is a pivotal year since all countries are coming together to present their new nationally determined contributions, or the NDCs, or the national climate plans. So what we want to see is a reflection of the various solutions that are available, but also how countries are implemented the targets we set at COP28, and see that reflected in the NDCs.
And that was actually my second question, because how do we take the double down target? How do we take this energy efficiency part, which is so connected to the cities, into the negotiation? How do we ensure that that is part of the now revised NDCs, so it's part of the COP30 plans?
Well, maybe we don't have to bring it so much into the negotiations themselves. I think it's important for countries here to be aware that the solutions are out there, because that will facilitate the decision-making process here. But ultimately, it's at the national level that awareness has to be clear. That the various actors that can provide the solutions have that kind of dialogue and interaction at the national level to instill that kind of confidence by policymakers at the national level and the local level to make them to facilitate their decision making and setting those kind of policies and reflecting that in the new NDCs and sort of in their national climate policy frameworks or whatever kind of national frameworks they have, but ultimately to be reflected then on the national level. So we really need to get more granular from the global level. We set the targets, but now it's time for all the parties, all the countries to reflect that in their work on national level.
Yeah. Is there something we can do to really make that happen? Because now we're here.
Well, I think we sort of the more energy we can get from the global level to actually instill that kind of confidence and set the direction clearly, hopefully we can then be all of us actors working also at the national level. And for us, for example, working through our embassies, through our various business networks that are present on the ground in the various countries that we want to be working with, and hopefully bringing together those kind of partnerships together with our EU partners, together with others, to ensure that that kind of action is being taken on the national level.
So, I mean, you said it yourself, solutions exist. We need to accelerate them at scale. I think that is where the issue sits. I think you hear that the industry and the private sector is ready to invest and stand behind this one. And still we hear that we are not on track for the double down target, right? So from your perspective, why do you see that not more is happening when it comes to this topic around energy efficiency?
Well, obviously, I mean that there are all countries have their different types of challenges. But I would think, for what we try to do from the Swedish side is basically work along 3 tracks. On the one hand, the policy track, sort of just to share experience in terms of how can you design your policy on a national level to accelerate action. Secondly, and also as the mayor was saying, make sure that there is finance allocated to implement that kind of policy. And thirdly, to unleash the innovative capacity and the technologies that already exist from the business sector. And hopefully by bringing these 3 tracks together, the policy, finance and technology, we can support countries in actually accelerating their transition. And hopefully by sort of setting policies which create demand for new types of solutions, deploying the solutions, which in turn could help to even further ramp up the targets in terms of emission reductions, and setting in new kinds of policies, which in turn will create demand for more technical solutions. So hopefully that's a virtuous circle in a way by deploying those 3 elements.
Sounds really good. So Thomas, you at the International Energy Agency are looking quite deeply at the moment into artificial intelligence and what happens to data centers in terms of energy demands, right? So from your perspective, what do you see as the challenges but also opportunities when we have this increase of energy demand coming from data centers?
Yeah, it's a very interesting time to look at this question for sure. I think every second conversation that I have here in Baku is about AI. So the way that the IEA looks at it is there is the question of the footprint of artificial intelligence, notably in terms of energy demand. And then there's the question of the opportunities provided by artificial intelligence to solve some of the problems in the energy system, to accelerate innovation, to improve efficiencies, to accelerate the uptake of renewable energy, for example. On the footprint side, today data centers make up about 1% of global electricity demand, so it's not much. But the problem is that they are very spatially concentrated. They tend to cluster together, and that creates a lot of challenges for grids at the local level in terms of the amount of generation capacity that may need to be added, in terms of the amount of grid infrastructure that may need to be added. So that's the challenge that we see on the footprint side. For the moment, we don't see it as a big game changer in terms of global energy demand, but it is a challenge at the local level. It's a challenge in some states, in some smaller countries like Ireland, for example. And then on the opportunity side, we see a lot of potential for artificial intelligence to accelerate the energy transition. So, for example, energy innovation is a key thing that we need to accelerate, and applying AI tools to discover new materials, new battery chemistries is showing a lot of promise. So we see opportunities on the energy transition side from artificial intelligence.
You mentioned this on the challenges of the local demand when it can come up to like 20, 30, 40% if you're really specific on certain data center locations. Can you elaborate a little bit more on why these challenges comes from a grid and energy supply perspective, from a systemic perspective that this happens?
So let me put it this way. A large data center can be about 100 megawatt of demand. That's comparable in size to a steel plant, so it's a big energy demand, but they cluster close together. Unlike steel plants, which are spatially dispersed, you get data centers coming up around specific infrastructure nodes, if there's fiber optic cables, around specific demand sources, for example, close to financial hubs, because finance uses a lot of data and likes there to be very rapid transfer of data, so they concentrate locally. So what we see is system operators being overwhelmed by the number of grid connections that are being requested, not being able to process them, not having enough grid capacity to meet those connection requests. In some places, concerns about the adequacy of generation capacity, and so places that are saying we need to add new generation capacity, and that may need to be fossil based because demand is increasing so rapidly. And at the same time, the outlook is very uncertain. So nobody is very clear how rapidly demand from data centers is going to grow. So for people trying to plan the outlook for the electricity system, to know how much grid infrastructure needs to be in this location, how much generation capacity needs to be in that location, it's a big challenge because of the uncertainty.
And we mentioned it here in the beginning as well, when we have such a rapid increase of the number of data centers, and we know when we hear about talking energy efficiency as well, right? Only 90% is being wasted of the energy produced. Do you see any good examples of where we're now moving into recovering and using that excess heat that actually is a source of energy for someone else, as are the data centers?
So there is a really significant and important agenda around data center efficiency. And here I want to highlight the challenge that is being created by speed. Because people are building or proposing data centers so rapidly, it's not necessarily the case that these are being designed from an optimal perspective for energy efficiency, that they're being located from an optimal perspective for integration of waste heat. And so there's a real issue for national policymakers, for regulators to consider how we can incentivize the most energy efficient construction of data centers, including in the design and conception phase. And there's some very interesting examples from companies like Schneider Electric and others, including Alfa Laval, of technologies that can be used to make data centers more energy efficient. Some of that will be on the hardware side, so we see continued improvements in computing hardware efficiency. It's been doubling roughly every 2 years. That may continue and will bring a lot of benefits. And then on this issue of waste heat integration, there are a number of interesting examples, notably in the Nordic countries. So the Stockholm data center plan integrating waste heat from data centers into the district heating system. There are projects in Helsinki in Finland doing similarly. So I think there's a lot of potential there. I would just be a little bit careful about assuming that this can solve all of the district heating problems, right? It's part of the solution, but it's not by any means the only one. Also because these are huge infrastructures. People don't like them near cities. And so you have the issue of transferring heat from the data center to the city. Maybe in the future we'll see industry starting to come up next to data centers and have industry to industry coupling rather than industry to residential coupling.
Yeah, so the sector coupling coming into approach. So with that, we would like to thank you, both Matthias, Thomas and Katrin, for joining us here in the studio. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So it's now time to focus on the industry aspect of energy efficiency, and especially how data centers and industry can accelerate net zero cities with the help of our next set of very interesting guests. They are Thomas Muller. We've been practicing that a little bit. It's a little bit better than normal. President of the Energy Division of Alfa Laval. David Rademacher, Vice President Sustainability and Climate at E.ON. And Farouk Shad, Head of Sustainability Business for the APMEA region, which is a new acronym for me. Asia Pacific, India, Middle East and Africa region. All right, at Schneider Electric. Great to see you. On Zoom we've got Dr. Holger Klaassen. Hello. Good. And he's
Hello.
Director Corporate Energy and Climate Affairs for Arubus, that's delivering heat to the city of Hamburg in Germany. And also in our Stockholm studio, we have Cecilia Jetschel, who is CSO and CMO of T-Loop. And we'll learn more about that. That's quite interesting. Thomas, connecting industries and cities to reuse heat. Sector coupling, it's called. It's nothing new. Tell us how Alfa Laval has been working with this for more than 50 years. And what are your learnings and why is this so relevant today?
Yeah, thanks, Nick, and fantastic work in pronouncing our names. Well done. It's right. We have been working with this for decades. Like you mentioned in the beginning, more than 50% of the waste or heat or energy used is going to waste. But already back in 1974, that's where we were the first large-scale waste heat recovery project was put in place in Sweden. Actually a process industry, Kemira, and reusing that heat from that plant into the district heating network is equal to 60,000 cars or pollution avoidance equal to that, so it has a massive effect. And that's 50 years ago, so we know how to do it. We have now also done it with Arubis, or Arubis has done this, where we have supported that project. I'm sure we will hear more about that. But it's still examples here and there. So that's why I think where we have seen a lot of buildings improving the energy efficiency with windows, insulations, etc. Same with the industries. They are reusing as much heat they can on the plant. But as soon as it comes to sector coupling, we are still at this one example here, one example there. And now, of course, with data centers booming everywhere, we have to take care of this waste heat generation and repurpose it.
Yep. David, you were working in so-called heat zones in the UK. I was looking at that project, by the way, at Bankside, in central London, opposite St Paul's on the South Bank. Very interesting. Tell us what they are and what you're doing, and you're harvesting the heat, basically, right?
Yeah, absolutely, that's right. Let me quickly connect to Thomas on data centers are just, or the demand for energy for data centers is exploding. Data centers will increase in energy consumption by a factor of 5 until 2028. That means if data centers were a country, they would be just as large as Germany. And we did some math on this. Data centers in Germany alone could deliver 20% of the heat for district heating systems in Germany. So that's massive. And you could also say data centers are, in the end, they are heaters that also can handle data. They are energy producers, and that's important. So in heat zones in the UK, that's exactly what we're doing. Thomas, you talked about how surplus energy is recovered, and we bring this to the demand in the cities. So we're designing with our award-winning technology Ectogrid. Actually, we received an award at COP29 in Dubai. Ectogrid is a low-temperature district heating system, and we can there actually utilize this heat. We can bring this to the demand. And as you said, in central London, we have a project where we're reducing the CO2 emissions compared to gas boilers by close to 90%. Just simply via recovering the heat, and that's impact.
Right, so it is happening, right? It is happening. It could be happening a lot faster, but it is happening. Let me now go to Holger. Hello, Holger. So you got this huge project with something called Warmer Hamburg to expand Germany's largest industrial heat system. Holger, can you tell us more?
Yes, I can. First of all, thanks for having me. Unfortunately, I couldn't join in person, but I hope this works as well. Arubis is one of the largest copper smelters worldwide, and we have this unique thing that we're located right in the middle of the city. And we have lots of waste heat here in our plant. Most of it we use on ourselves. 90% of our own steam demand is covered by our own waste heat. and we have this exothermal reaction in the copper refining process, where we smelt the copper concentrates and let them react with oxygen. And then we have a real huge amount of waste heat. And we started in 2018 when here a whole new part of a city, the Hafen city, was built in the harbor. We thought of delivering this heat to the households there. And right this summer, we fulfilled the second and the third step of this very huge project. And right now, we are able to supply 28,000 households with our waste heat, which is totally CO2 free because of this exothermic reaction we have, and that is round about. I have an echo on myself from Stockholm, I think. Maybe you can switch that off.
We're hearing you perfectly clear here. Perfectly clear
perfect.
in. Yeah, sorry.
I try to get over it. And we save 120,000 tons of CO2 each year by this project. So that shows that the industry is not part of the problem of the climate crisis, but can also be part of the solution.
Holger, what's this copper production that's involved in the heating here? Copper production?
Yeah, it is. It is
copper production. Okay.
It is copper production, exactly. Yeah.
What happens if they shut the copper production down? Where do you get the heat after that?
That is one of the biggest challenges with industrial waste heat, that it is not secured and you have these plant shutdowns every couple of years. Right. The good thing is that the heat is needed only in the winter times. And we try to do our shutdowns and revision works in the summertime. But the energy supplier who's using the heat and selling it to the households, they need to have some backup plans as well.
Got you. And just give us a brief glimpse into how was this funded? Where did the money come from to actually get this project up and running? Briefly.
Yeah. What I can tell you, there is no business case, so you need external funding. We received or a huge amount of subsidies from the German Ministry of Economy and Climate. And you need to, the problem is that you have different amortization periods in the industry, which is around about 5 years, and energy infrastructure has amortization periods of 30 years. So you need to try to shift the payment to the front of the investment, and that's what we did with these state subsidies.
Right.
And with the Hamburg Wärme energy supplier.
So God bless the German government there. Okay.
Yeah, that was a big help. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked.
Farouk, we talked a lot about how to use waste heat to heat our buildings, but this heat can also be turned into cooling, right? And can you tell us how this works?
Sure. Let me start by thanks for having me on the panel.
Yeah.
And for
thank Alpha Laval, actually.
And for pronouncing Etmia correctly as well.
Whoa! I'm going to get a little gold star after this, aren't I?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm representing Schneider Electric. So we are involved in the infrastructure of the data centers. And data centers today account for 1% of the electricity consumption globally, 1.5%. And also 1% on the greenhouse gas emissions. So there's a lot of waste, which of course can be converted, and it can be liquid cooling is what is needed. And Schneider is playing a big role in liquid cooling. And that is, we recently acquired a company in the US as well for liquid cooling, because we believe with that technology and with absorption technology, we'll be able to tackle that. Because moving forward with AI and with large language modules, we'll see the expansion of data centers everywhere. So we want to make sure that we are able to convert the heat, we are able to convert that with liquid technology into use.
Right. So you take the heat with some kind of heat converter, you cool it, and then you cool the building, cool the data center. Yep. So it's this kind of virtual loop.
That's
a little bit the circular economy. Oh wow.
Something
Okay.
Like
All right. You're Schneider's Schneider Electric's head of sustainability business for this very big region, right? Is this concept of liquid cooling, do you think, starting to catch on? I mean, how many projects do you have? Have you started? Will you start? How many are interested? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you see, the Asia Pacific region, the rate of digitization, the internet usage is super high. So we see a lot of data centers coming up in the region, and hence everyone moving into the liquid cooling technology there.
Right.
So for Asia Pacific, for Middle East, we see a huge demand for
Right.
Middle East as well.
Right.
Now, India, on the other hand, is still at the early stages. But of course,
But
with
it's
the
gonna
population
come,
in
isn't
India
it?
is going to come
Yeah,
as well.
it's gonna come
so the
big time.
emerging markets is the next frontier for us.
Yeah. Okay, got you. Just hold that, guys. We are gonna have a discussion afterwards, Thomas. Let me just. I don't want to forget Cecilia, who's also here on the magic of Zoom in Stockholm. Cecilia, hi. Now you've got a solution that's a little bit different, right? So tell us what T-Loop is doing in terms of data centers into energy plants.
Yes, just like that. We turn data centers into energy plants. And we do that by building them in existing buildings in urban cities. We do not need to build them as big because we come from the energy perspective. So we always calculate the need of heat first, and then we match the data capacity for that. And we build it, as I said, in existing buildings. And a data center, as you know, has a lot of untapped assets. We do produce a lot of heat, and that one we can use to warm up the buildings we're located in, nearby buildings, or tap into the district heating net. But we also have the power capacity in the reserve capacity, like gensets, which we have in batteries, and that we have actually developed our own service for, a software and the hardware, so we can use that for grid balancing and for peak shaving, but still guarantee the uptime for our IT customers. Because I think it's also worth mentioning that we are the infrastructure of digitalization. So this is what the data center is. I mean, we couldn't be here broad alive today if there weren't a data center somewhere in the world hosting this session. So we are needed, but we also need to change the way we do it today.
So just give a glimpse into this. So people think if you want a data center, it's got to be as big as the Titanic, right? But what you're saying is, no, you can have smaller data centers, more distributed in some ways, but they're located in buildings, so you've got a direct customer for the heat, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, if we start thinking about that, I mean, we use the data mainly where people live in the cities. So it's actually better to produce the data and use the data in the cities. I mean, that the network also takes energy. And if we all talk about power constraints today, because I think it was mentioned earlier in the previous session, it's quite hard to find power connectivity. But if we, as we do, we identify where there are unused resources in the existing buildings, and then we can use that. So we sort of connect ourselves to the building who has an untapped resource to that power, and then we can maximize the data capacity based on what we have.
Good, and you're already connected to a grid, so that's also useful too. All right, thanks very much. We're going to have a little chat about all this. I mean, there's loads of, the microphones are shooting up like rockets on firework night. Okay, actually, to be honest, Thomas was first. I have to be... I'm managing the playground here. Thomas was first, and he must go first. Thomas.
Yeah, no, I was just want to reconnect to the AI and the streaming services, because it's really the traditional data centers. You could do a lot of, you could do the cooling in principle with air cooling. But what's happening now is with the demands going up, the energy intensity go up of each server. So you have no chance of doing air cooling anymore. So you have to do liquid cooling. It's simply, there is no other way. But that's also a good thing from a heat reuse perspective, because what you call a heat converter, Nick, we prefer to call it a heat exchanger.
Okay, fine.
That's
all right. That's why I'm not in this business.
It's much easier with liquid cooling to recover that heat and reuse it. And then I love what Cecilia is saying, because I think it's really coming down to city planning. Because right now we have so many data centers placed in areas where there is no way to use the waste heat. It's simply too far away from the usage points.
Yeah.
So,
David, you want to jump in?
That's exactly the point that we need to discuss, because data centers need a lot of energy, and they, of course, then produce a lot of excess heat. But we have the issue as grid operator. I mean, E.ON is largest distribution system operator in Europe. We have the issue that in Frankfurt, for example, the German city of Frankfurt, grid capacity is booked out for the next 10 years. So currently, it takes 2 to 4 years to build a data center, but it takes 3 times as long, up to 12 years, to actually connect the data center. And that's because data centers, if they're built in cities where there's grid congestion already, that makes it very hard for us. So we'll always have to think both ends, energy input, energy output. And so this is, Nick, you asked, we could always do more, and why don't we do more? It's the system perspective. We're working on all ends of the system right now, and that's very complex.
Well, it's the same with renewable energy. Some people are waiting 10 years for a connection for a new wind farm, right?
Off-grid?
Off-grid, yeah. I mean, we heard something earlier about Google, for example. A woman from the American solar thing was saying that Google is now kind of just going off-grid, right? But you're in a developing country region. This is really interesting. So I understand that the need for the cooling, but is there district heating in your region where they could take the heat demand?
There is in the Middle East.
Right.
We see that as well. My perspective on this is that to counter this, it's a team sport, so we need to collaborate together, and we need radical collaboration. And I think, coming back to your point that you were mentioning earlier, we need collaboration with the governments, we need collaboration with the private sector, and that is something missing today, or it's not enough, let's put it like that. And I think that will take us further, because clearly there's a demand, clearly the data centers are going to be more and more intense, more energy consumption will be there, and that collaboration is something we need to look at.
Right. I've got a whole sea of questions here, so we've got 8 minutes 25. Now, just because you're on Zoom doesn't mean you're invisible, okay? So I'm going to keep looking a little bit. If you raise your hands, then you have to jump in, okay? Let's just go back to this patchwork of financing. You just touched on that there. There clearly is, it's a bit messy, right? For a city to just be able to move ahead. Anybody got any bright ideas in addition to the previous bright ideas we heard? I mean, you've got some experience, Holger. What are you finding, for example, Cecilia, with your centres? Or do you actually overcome that problem because you're at smaller scale within buildings that already exist? Or what is it?
No, I mean, we're facing those challenges as well, as we need to. I mean, a data center is very costly to establish. And normally, as I said, we're part of the infrastructure. And if we look on how the financial market works for the infrastructure funds today, or the core funds, they're looking for stable investments where they can really calculate on a long-term investment. And I think they need to change slightly. I think we need some other type of metrics where we can see what will the future infrastructure be, and perhaps have a larger risk appetite also from the investment side on that. I think that's necessary. And also, coming back, there was a very interesting report from McKinsey I think it's a month ago, and it says that it's probably needed 250 to 300 billion US dollar to be invested in data centers. And I think actually data centers also need to take part of that investment and place it into the energy infrastructure to have that in their business case as well.
Well, then that's policy and regulation, isn't it, as well, as being, unless they're just all angels that just will do it anyway, right? Holger, I mean, you had support from the German government with subsidies and things like that, but were there other sources? Were they tough to get? Or is there, I mean, it'd be great just to be given the whole money from one place, bang, right? But so many people have to trail through the detritus of the bureaucracy of our countries to actually find little pots of money that add up, right? Which isn't much fun.
Exactly. The problem is you need planning security. The energy suppliers investing lots in pipelines and the infrastructure, and we're investing a lot, and you need planning security. And of course, it helps if you're right in the middle of the city, as we are. But what would also help, and that's a regulatory thing, is if you would have a green market. So since May in Germany, we have a new instrument of certificates of origin for green heat. But actually, we can't use them because there is no demand, because the private customer can't really choose to buy green heat. So we don't get an add-on on this. And the second thing that would maybe help is if it would be taken into account somehow within the CO2 allowance grant. We get free allowances from the European Union, and this heat is only accepted at a very, very small amount, even though we save 120,000 tons of CO2 each year. And here in Hamburg, in Scope 1 emissions, we only have 150,000 in total. So by this only, we could call ourselves almost carbon neutral. And that is another incentive that would maybe help to make others follow our example.
The EU needs to value that waste heat much better than it does currently with these. Okay.
Exactly.
Thomas.
Yeah, I think it's also about putting demands on where we put up data centers and what demands there are on data centers, as Cecilia says. And here we talk about Germany a lot, but Germany is actually a bit front runner in this regulatory putting demands on data centers that by 2026 they need to have 10% heat recovery or heat reuse. By 2028 it's 20%, and that will of course drive this forward. So they have it in mind when they already put up a greenfield data center. Then of course we also have to continue build out the district heating network, because today's network can take so much heat, but that has to continue so that we continue replacing gas and oil boilers, which today is just polluting. I mean, so it's also about that infrastructure. It's not only the sector coupling, but also making that grid bigger.
But in many countries, if you build something on a greenfield site, right, or if you build something in a place, you have to spend some money on restoring that area to the nature that it was when you arrived, right? There are some quite, why couldn't they have a rule that says if you're going to build a huge data center on the edge of town, you have to invest in the cities, in a district heating system for the city, or at least a co-owner, a co-financer, or there could be all kinds of creative ways to...
And if there was heat recovery credits, to support that also. Then
there we go.
Get things moving.
Yeah, I don't think we have a lack of involvement from governments on corporate action. So I think it's not about another policy and obligations to build up district heating. I think it's about utilizing the existing systems. And the problem, and that's also what Holger said, is that in calculations for business cases, heat prices are very different. It's a very local thing. So while we have a big affordability discussion about energy prices since the gas crisis, since the war in Ukraine, there's a lot of pressure on energy prices, and power prices and gas prices are strongly regulated. For heat prices, it always depends on the local situation. So there is no such thing as the one-size-fits-all solution. And that's what makes it so difficult. You always have to take into account also what kind of heat source are you replacing with your recovery. So it's extremely difficult regulatory-wise.
I mean, we've talked about the liquid cooling for the data centers, but could you imagine in some of the hotter countries of the region you're in, they might one day want district cooling systems?
We have district cooling.
Oh, there you go then, you see.
That's
amazing.
That, absolutely. But coming back to the point, in emerging economies, we need policy work that needs to happen, and which is something where a lot of time needs to be spent in this whole public-private partnership, especially with the non-profit or the NGOs as well. There's a lot of investment that needs to be done from a finance side also, to make sure we are utilizing the investment, we are utilizing and moving forward on the technology side.
Well, maybe we just end briefly on that, because actually just maybe two people can answer, right? Who's going to facilitate the collaborations between the public and the private? Whose job is it? Quickly. Father Christmas? No? I mean, who's supposed to do this?
I have a perspective that private can take the lead purely because of efficiency.
Okay. Yeah, is it the private taking the lead? Okay, fair enough. I think that was a really interesting session. Thank you so much to our guests coming in by the magic of Zoom from Germany and also from Stockholm, and the fantastic panel here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
In this final session, we will take a closer look into the financing part and how we can replace what was previously called by Nick the financial patchwork. So a super complex network of how we can get the finance to work, both for data centers, we have the excess heat part, but also the whole sustainable cities angle. And this is a finance COP, so it's all about how we unlock that finance that is required for our double down target for 2030. So we have the pleasure to have two final guests with us here on the show today. I have Aditi Maheshwari, the Managing Director for Climate Action Implementation at C40, a global network of nearly 100 mayors of the world's leading cities. I also have with me Sean Kidney, the CEO of Climate Bonds Initiative, an international organization that is aiming to mobilize the global capital for climate action. So welcome both of you. If we start with you, Aditi, when and why did the C40 start to have a financial institution?
Thank you for having me, firstly. So, as you mentioned, C40 is a global network of 100 of the world's largest cities leading on climate action. Our cities and our mayors have the ambition, the commitment, and the ideas on how to take forward climate action, but they need support on how to turn these ideas into bankable projects. And that's where the C40 Cities Finance Facility comes in. It is, I would say, it's not a financial institution, it's more of a project preparation facility, an initiative that we deliver in partnership with C40 and the German development agency GIZ, and it was launched in 2015 and has so far been successfully supporting these cities to prepare and implement infrastructure projects that are for the climate, for the benefit of the climate, thanks to support from our donors, the UK, the US, and the Germany.
So, keep picking up on that, right? Then, so how does this work? I mean, in practical, right? And how many cities has been involved? Is these the countries that it's only implemented today, or is it spread more from a global perspective, or is this the best practices countries we're referring to?
Okay, so many questions. And so let me pick up on this. We are led by our cities, and so the cities will come to us with ideas, and then we work with them to provide technical support and structuring support to develop these projects and connect the cities to the financial instruments that will be most suited to those projects. And since 2015, we have worked with 30 cities across the global south. So this financing facility is only focused on the global south. And we have worked with these cities to deliver projects across a range of sectors that are critical to the climate. So, for example, sustainable mobility, water, waste management, nature-based solutions, renewable energy, green buildings, and from everywhere from Bogota to Medellin to Durban, not Medellin, sorry, Mumbai. Mumbai.
Hometown, Mumbai.
And we hope to continue to provide this support on an ongoing basis for priority projects that cities identify.
Right, yes. And there is a specific project I have to ask you about.
Sure.
And that is also to connect back to our previous panel on Schneider Electric, where we talked so much about the district cooling, because when we talk about heat reuse and we talk a lot about heating, but the absolute biggest driver for energy demand today, except for data center, is actually the cooling of the cities, right? And I know you have a very specific project in Kuala Lumpur where you utilize the river water for cooling of the cities. Is there something you can tell us more about from a C40 perspective of how you support on also the cooling demands?
Okay, so we are working across a range of different types of energy efficiency and power renewable energy projects. With the Kuala Lumpur project, and let me pivot and talk about another project that is not related to the data centers at all, but it is very much about supports temperature control within buildings. So we have been working in Jakarta, where they had reached out to us for energy efficiency support and for deployment of solar rooftop panels across 28 of their public hospitals. And this was something that they have identified as a first step in towards by the municipality on energy transformation, because as you know, Indonesia has a very coal-powered energy generation base. So this initial first step is a way for the city to reduce its energy bills and then redeploy this funding towards other public services. You support the health the staff and the patients and the comfort of everyone using those buildings, because what you have is better temperature control, you have protected the buildings against extreme weather events and also power outages, which is it's a critical piece for healthcare and public infrastructure that the cities are providing. And we're not just limiting our engagement to sort of this individual project. We're also working as C40 to help the city look at the green building codes. So that will then help other cities, that could be replicated by other cities and the private sector, so encouraging market transformation.
Hold that on scalability. I just wanted to ask Sean as well here. Climate bonds is also a way to finance climate action at the moment. How would that work from a city perspective? From a city perspective.
Well, it is working for a city perspective.
Yes,
we have green municipal bonds.
Yes,
Malmo,
tell us.
for example, one of the early ones.
Yes.
We've got a discount price from the first green bond they ever issued, which allowed them to pay for the whole sustainability program. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And that applies to San Francisco. That applies to Vadodara and Gujarat, who issued a green bond just early this year in January. That was 14 times oversubscribed. And everyone used to say, oh, Indian investors, they don't care about green. Were they wrong?
Yeah.
So everywhere around the world, when cities bring debt to the table, whether it be a municipal bond or a bond by a city utility, like a railway company or a water utility, they sell like hotcakes on a Sunday fair.
So we're doing enough? Is that what you're saying?
God, no.
God, no. No, because it sounded like it was bread and butter and it was just ready to go.
Let me be clear. We're actually doing enough on investor demand.
Yeah.
That's there. The problem we have everywhere in the world is getting more out the door.
Yeah.
So as Aditya sorts out these city programs, they have the opportunity to start issuing green bonds. Well, they've got to have a debt rating. You know, in India, for example, there's a lot of cities that don't even do double entry bookkeeping yet. They've got a long way before they become creditworthy.
Yeah.
But the ones that do can take advantage of this market straight away, and it's growing. In the US, it's a real phenomena, and that's not going to change under any change of presidential administration. It's going to continue to grow. So it's a big slice of the global green bond market, which is, by the way, $4 trillion outstanding now. It's no longer small.
No.
And it needs, but you know, of course, it needs to get bigger.
Yeah.
We need every one of the C4 cities to have a massive program that they can then use to get finance for from the private sector. That's really the point.
And are we good, because you mentioned all about this of the different cities, are we good in taking the learnings from each of the cities and each of these green bonds initiatives?
humans are slow sometimes, aren't they? I mean, isn't it terrible? I mean, we've got the C40 trying to sort this out. I appreciate
so
that.
you say that she's responsible for all
no.
She fix it, and then you come and help.
To be clear, we've got ICLE trying to sort this. We've got OECD trying to. We've got an EU project. We do it. There's a whole lot of organisations now
I know.
working to try and shift understandings and shift opportunity to where it's most needed.
Yeah.
But and in geological terms, we're moving at warp speed, right? In economic history. But of course it's not fast enough, because really we should be stopping all emissions globally at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yes.
So that's the benchmark we're against.
Yes.
So against that, of course it's not fast enough, but it is growing very fast. I mean, just the general green bond market has grown 100-fold in 10 years. That is pretty good growth, but it's not enough, because it needs to grow at least another 10 times to be properly useful.
And how do you see that from a developing country's perspective? Is it the same type of growth rates when we look into developing economies? Yes.
Absolutely. I mean,
so
like
you see it everywhere.
That Vara bond was in India.
Yes.
And the Indian government issued a sovereign bond that was also really attractively priced. At Variety in China, we see a lot of provincial bonds coming out. Cape Town has done green bonds for water resilience. And this is a bit of a clue for emerging markets, right? Mitigation is one thing, but actually resilience is turning out to be way more important, because climate impacts are hitting. You know the story. You know, we failed to take adequate action. And so therefore we've got to prepare for drought, for storm, for water, for social disruption, for economic disruption. And that's resilience.
Yes.
And we published the Climate Bonds Resilience Taxonomy a couple of months ago with UNDRR and UN Women, which is guidance for what to do. That market will grow very rapidly in emerging markets in the next few years.
I think I talked to Aditi a little bit before the show, and you've raised so far about $650 million of money for this kind of project preparedness for climate projects in cities, and I know some of them, because I looked on the website, do bring together energy efficiency and renewable energies in some of the cities. So that it is happening. But you've got something you're announcing here, I think. Is that correct?
So I'm going to signal it, because I am not at the point, we're not yet ready to go. It's coming.
It's coming.
But to say that the C40 Cities Finance Facility has been providing support and will continue to provide support, and so far has mobilized, as you said, $650 million since it started in 2015, and we're en route to have leveraged over $1 billion by the end of 2025 for these infrastructure projects that we have done so far, and we intend to continue to support the cities to get these projects done and implemented. I think one of the critical pieces that you raised, Sean, about developing countries and cities, creditworthiness, being able to raise bonds, that's something that is a challenge, and I think we're gonna, that because national regulation sometimes prevents cities from being able to access capital markets and or borrow internationally. But that's just to pick up on that one point. It's amazing that the cities that have done this and have done this well are like shining examples for others to follow.
But city utilities can always raise debt if they can. And when we look at what's got to happen in a city, green property, we have about $400 billion of green property bonds around the world already. A significant number in emerging markets. And that's an area of growth. So there's lots of aspects of, let's call it the urban revolution that we need to have, which are beginning to show up in the financing pipeline.
So, I mean, we are here that we don't have time, right? So we know that we have quite little time. You say we're making quite good progress, but it's not at the scale where we need it. So, I mean, to get all these financing in place and also to implement this at the scale we need, what do we need to do from now on going forward? You have a lot of great initiatives, but how do we get it at the scale that we really need to? What will be your input to that?
So, I mean, I just want to say that we you're talking about bonds, but the cities and the projects that we've done so far have tapped a range of financing solutions. So quite often we find innovative ways for the cities themselves to use their city finance. For example, in Curitiba, for the solar pyramid that we did there, the city used innovative its own financing. But in Jakarta, we use public-private partnerships to deploy electric buses. In Durban, we use development finance institutions to help finance nature-based solutions. But in each case, we think that the city needs to be empowered and part of a process, or fully invested in the process in order to get these solutions done and replicated and scaled. So we have been working closely with these cities to build as part of making sure that they have the experience and the expertise necessary to be able to independently replicate and upscale these projects and programs, so that the objective being you shift them from a individual project base to a more programmatic approach that can actually send collective demand signals to the market, so you can have further scale up. But the point about sharing experience is where C40 Cities comes in, because we bring all these cities together to learn from each other on how they do their bankable projects and what works and what doesn't work, so they can easily replicate and positive experiences and cut short the learning time. So on the climate finance side, that is also something that is where our cities would benefit from that exchange on the bond side.
And from your perspective, Sean?
Clearly, peer support and peer competition is very important. We need every city to think, oh, that city over there is doing better.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's what things like the C40 are about, essentially. We need clarity about what you've got to do. You've got to make it easy to understand what are the right kind of climate investments. This is not always easy. We've been doing that through taxonomies, now national taxonomies, which are essentially shopping lists for the future, which make it clear this sort of infrastructure qualifies. If it's not on the list, actually it's not future fit. That's one part of it. And then we link that to incentives, which we're starting to do. We now have development banks, guarantee companies, providing guarantees against stuff that's in the taxonomy to cities, to corporates, and to governments. And there's a lot more incentives we can do. You know, in China, the central bank provides cheaper capital at the liquidity lending window of the central bank if you post green bonds as collateral by banks. And we're looking at the same thing for municipalities at the moment. You know, there's a lot we can do to turbocharge this. We're just at the beginning of the J-curve.
Okay. Any final closing remarks from both of you before we close the session here today?
I would just say that one of the things that we really need to think about is the international climate finance architecture around this space, because climate finance generally goes through large international financial funds and facilities, and they are aligned to national frameworks and structured to be aligned around national frameworks, which makes it an uphill struggle for cities and their projects to be recognized and receiving financing flows. So I think as we collectively work in partnership, we need to bring the private sector, the financing instruments, the national actors, and cities and the subnational piece together to think about the solutions that make this fit for purpose for the time that we're in, because I think the subnational piece does need to scale up finance, and we're here to support this, and these tangible examples are a really good way to show how this can be done.
Thank you. Fantastic summary of what needs to be done. Thank you both for joining us.
Sorry.
It's absolutely clear that we have all the solutions we need to make a huge difference. I mean, we can do it. And the private sector has the solutions. We are ready to take the actions, and we want to implement this at scale. The world leaders can be confident that the industry can deliver on really bold and ambitious NDCs. So we want to inspire how we can unlock this finance from a city perspective.
But how we deploy and scale it in a very short period of time. We have nearly just less than 5 years to halve emissions, for example. How can we make the NDCs, these national climate plans, attract finance to make things happen on a big scale? One answer to these questions is predictable regulations and policies that truly support stepped up action for energy efficiency in cities, and the crucial access to finance that is simple, straightforward, uncomplicated, and releases the potential for cities to act, and aligned with the ability to access finance in a far less complex, streamlined way to actually save time. Let me just say, if you have any questions about this show, if you want to post some questions to the speakers, go to We Don't Have Time, its app at wedon'thavetime.org, and get involved. And we want to say thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much for Madeline.
Thank you, Nick.
For fantastic moderation together, and we look forward to doing it again.
Yes, thank you so much.
Called, there we go. But to pull off the energy transition, the world needs to do an almost unimaginable amount of building. Terawatts of clean energy capacity, millions of miles of transmission lines, billions of batteries and EVs, and much, much more. The climate conversation is often focused on policy, financing and other considerations, and of course those things are all critically important, but another question often goes overlooked. Who is going to build this stuff? I'm not talking about governments or big companies here. I mean the actual boots on the ground, so to speak, the people, the workforce. Do we have enough qualified engineers, technicians, factory workers to make and install these technologies? If not, how can we get them ready and fast? So, to talk about this, I've got some lovely guests. Shall we have a bumper? So, preparing today's workforce for a greener tomorrow. Two fantastic guests. We've got Abby Hopper, President and CEO of the Solar Energy Industries Association. Great to see you again.
You too.
And Debapriya Dutt, Director of Projects South and Southeast Asia for EarthDay.org. I used to actually work a little bit for EarthDay.org. Can you believe that? Yes. With the wonderful Kathleen. All right. So, Abby, let's start with you first. How large is the demand for workers in the renewable energy sector, and how do you see this changing?
Yeah. So, the demand for energy workers, clean energy workers in the United States in particular, is growing rapidly. Just last year, the growth rate for the clean energy workforce grew at double the rate of just the regular workforce in the United States. There's literally hundreds of thousands of people employed. But your question, how's it going? It, just in the solar and storage industry alone, we think it's about to quadruple right? And if you add wind, and then you add offshore wind, and then you add hydrogen, and then you add, I don't know, maybe another country or two, and you can see it's
ocean
wild.
tidal.
Ocean tidal. There are technologies, there's countries, there's so much to do. So that workforce is growing incredibly quickly. And I remind my members that it's a nice problem to have, that we're growing so quickly, that we need more workers, but it's a real challenge.
Okay. So, what types of jobs are we discussing here? Are these primarily high-tech roles that require degrees, or are they opportunities accessible to a broader range of skills?
So the thing about the green economy is it is very broad and inclusive. So while there are some high-tech roles, but there are roles available for entry level as well, and not everybody requires a specialized degree. And this is precisely why at earthday.org we emphasize the importance of climate education, and we are asking for that to be included in the NDCs of every country, because what we have noticed is a lot of youth assume that they do not have an opportunity in the green economy sector because they don't have the STEM skills or high-tech degree, which is not true. Until the time there is information available for them, they will never know that they do have opportunity even at the entry level, or just certain specialized courses. Vocational training programs are enough for them to find jobs in the green energy sector. So recently, there was a survey conducted by the World Bank which shows that 83% of youth are deeply impacted by the effect of climate change, and they are genuinely interested to do something about it. But the thing is that they feel they do not have the degree or the specialized knowledge for it. And when a further survey was conducted to know how much are they aware of the basic problems that we are facing, it was found that they are not aware. 33% of them were barely aware. So they do not have the information that is necessary. And how can you possibly solve a problem if you do not understand it fully? So climate education, we advocate, is not just necessary, it is the biggest weapon that we have to fight this climate crisis.
I suppose it's kind of a bit nuanced as well, isn't it? Because, I mean, the green economy, the old brown economy, however we want to phrase it, right? Or the clean economy versus the sort of polluting, resource inefficient economy. Lots of ways of describing it. Some of these jobs are actually the same jobs, but just with a little tweak, right? I mean, if you're a good plumber, you can probably handle heat pumps quite quickly, right? You need a little bit of retraining, but not something massive. But if you're coming out of, say, working in, say, parts of a chemical factory, and you want to work in biodiversity improvements, that's probably a bit of a switch from that to that, right? To make it so there are different kinds of green jobs, some that are a little bit like the jobs that we kind of have now, but there are others that require real retraining, right?
Right.
And who does that in the USA, for example? Who does training?
So there's a lot of different organizations that are do training, and I think your point is well taken, that there are different, some skill sets. For example, if you are an offshore oil and gas worker, it is not a big stretch to become an offshore wind worker, right? That sort of underwater welding is the same regardless of what the technology is, for example. And I would say, just to your point, 2/3 of the jobs in the solar and storage industry do not require a college degree, right? It is a very accessible job. But there's a number of organizations doing training, right? If you start at the federal level, there are certainly federally funded workforce training efforts. There are state level, but there are also a lot of unions that are doing job training. There are one of the interesting developments in our country is that unions see, for a long time it was sort of a binary choice. Either you like fossil fuel or you like clean energy. And people sort of picked which side of the coin they were on. And what we've seen evolve is that they realize there's opportunity in clean energy and you can grow that. And so a lot of unions have developed labor unions have developed specific training programs. And then a lot of other organizations, like we represent a lot of big construction companies. So many of our jobs are construction jobs, right? And so companies that for 150 years have built roads and hospitals and airports, in 2008, 2009 started building solar and now employ tens of thousands of people. They have in-house training programs as well. And so they will take workers, as you said, sort of young people, people coming out of technical schools, people leaving the military, leaving prison, and really teach them their way of installing, building, project managing. And that's been a real source of employment and deployment, right? To make this happen.
So I suppose we're talking about the US and you know, a rich economy with a lot of infrastructure lined up this way and a good trades union movement still. There are not many of those left, but still trades union. But in some of the developing countries, of course, these are kind of almost brand new industries coming in. If you have living in a rural area of Bangladesh or something, and suddenly these are engineering jobs, and you know they have to meet certain standards, and so you get the certification. This is where you get some challenges too, don't you? So the world is different in different places in terms of green jobs.
Yes, it is. While there are a lot of training programs that are available now, and if we work with the local communities, we engage in training programs for them, there is a definite way of solving this. And also, you know, there are government-aided programs for training people in these sector of jobs, because like she mentioned that a lot of times you do have the fundamental skills, it just needs a little bit of tweaking. So that transition is very smooth in that case. And I feel that, you know, I think there is so much of overemphasis on the negative impacts of whether it is climate change or how difficult it is to transition into the green economy or avail green jobs, but there is not enough emphasis on the possibilities and how it can really be so smooth. So I think we at earthday.org really believe in changing the narrative from talking about the negative impacts to looking at, hey, what else is possible and what can we create here, because there are ample opportunities even in the green economy space for everybody, literally.
There's something that the United Nations Educational and Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, which most ordinary people know UNESCO as the person that puts a sticker on the site and calls it the World Heritage Site. But actually they do a lot more than that, and they have a unit within that, don't they, working in countries around the world that does something called TIVET. Is it TIVET? Teaching vocational something training. So they are actually in quite a few countries around the world bringing these vocational training programs to the assistance of national governments in some of the poorer countries of the world. And often this is funded by overseas development aid agencies. So GIZ in Germany and USAID, and I don't know if USAID does it, but for example. So there's a role there in terms of, because actually it's in everyone's interest to fight climate change, right? No one country can solve it. So the more green jobs there are in the developing countries and more quickly, it's actually in the interests of the UK, the USA, Europe, as well as in the countries of concern, right?
I think sort of a point to build upon what you said at the beginning about youth and sort of the motivation, right? We've done polling amongst our workforce, and the youngest generation of workers are really motivated by a desire to do social good, right? They prioritize that perhaps over some other sort of more historic benefits. And this area of clean energy deployment and other technologies is an area where that fills that need. Like we see that in our own workforce as a company, we see that in our workforce in our country. And so, you know, I love the way you framed it. Like this is not only a conversation about sort of bad outcomes and scarcity, but really about positive outcomes and opportunity and growth, and sort of targeting young people's desire to be part of the solution
Yes.
and making it accessible is really important.
Really, yes.
Yeah.
And also not just their desire to do good, the fact that a lot of them suffer from what we call climate anxiety
Mhm.
and what is referred to as climate
Mhm.
burden.
Mhm.
I think the transition towards taking action towards it
Mhm.
can happen seamlessly if there is enough information available for them. So the anxiety can then transcend into informed action towards the planet, and
Absolutely.
then that whole burden needn't be a burden, but there is enough and more ways of mitigating climate change and also developing adaptability. I think when we have the information available, we know how better to adapt to the rising temperatures, develop flood resilience, for example, to have better preparedness for disasters.
Yes.
So all
yes,
of that.
that's also very important
Yeah,
training.
yeah,
Yes, I mean,
yeah.
literally, it can often mean alerts that people literally jump up into the tops of trees, right?
Exactly,
And
exactly.
how do you get up into that tree?
Yes,
and can you
yes.
jump?
Yeah.
That's another thing too. But you know, I suppose there's two broad sides to this in some ways. One is you've got the young people coming into the economy, and you want them trained to be able to take part in the green economy as quickly as possible and to have training. Then you've got an older generation that's being, basically laid off from work because their industry is no longer in step with what we want, right? Like the oil and gas industry, for example, or coal mining, right? So, and that's also very political as well, because those people need to know that they can be retrained very quickly into new jobs that will come in the green economy. If not, they're going to be the kind of people that vote against any action on climate change because they feel frustrated and victims, right? So there's some also psychology in this training, as well as the practicalities of it too, in terms of creating consensus that this is a good direction we're going in.
That is a very good point, and I would add to it that not only is there a job in the clean energy economy, but it is a good job, right? It's a job that you can sustain your family on, that has health and safety standards, and you can see a future for yourself. And that's been one of the areas where we've gotten pushback in the United States, is that we've heard someone who maybe was in a coal miner, and some of us might think, well, now you get to work on a roof, right? And you're outside in the sun. What could there be to not like about that? And they say, well, I have a union and I have a pension, and you want me to come work in the solar industry? Like, where are those similar kinds of benefits? And so that has been an interesting conversation. Some of the provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act have required prevailing wage, required apprenticeship, and so we're getting a little bit more routinized in some of those areas, but. You're right. There is more than just skills training, right? There is sort of being a part of a solution. The other thing I hear a lot is that maybe at least here in the United States, or not, I'm not in the United States now, but in the United States, I live in Appalachia, I live in Kentucky, I live in West Virginia. I don't want to move to California or Arizona or somewhere where there's a thriving solar market. Luckily the prices are such that you don't have to anymore. Like the market's growing everywhere, but that's a real issue, is like matching people and skills and place.
Yeah. I do think with the developing countries, one of the things that would be a great boost for this training would be if more companies that make solar or wind or I don't know, energy efficient heat converters or whatever the products are that are part of the green economy, instead of just kind of selling them into the developing countries, actually put manufacturing sites in some of those places, because then you'd have an automatic need for training courses for local people for these new jobs. And some have done it. I think Vestas have done it Siemens did it in Morocco, I think. Siemens did it in Morocco. But a bit more of that would actually then create those opportunities for people to join the workforce there. Right. And as long as it's, not being seen by some other countries as, we're offshoring everything to developing countries, as long as some balance in this, that could be an important factor too.
Yes.
So we've got just 1 minute and 28 seconds left. So any little wrap up here on this? There's clearly going to be growing jobs in this sector, right? And it's a question of what we do to make sure there's a workforce. And I think there's probably half the workforce don't need much training because it's pretty similar jobs. If you're a train driver in an electric train, it's a bit like driving a normal train. But those other areas, maybe going from mechanical engineering to electrical engineering is a bit of a step. I don't know.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
So it's sort of in closing, I agree with that, and I think it sort of goes to the question of an equitable transition, right?
Yeah.
And as I think about what an equitable transition means, right? It does mean that the workforce is reflective of the communities that it serves, right? And so I think we can make a statement that broad that can apply to a lot of different kinds of communities, but certainly that is reflective of the communities it serves. And secondly, you know, we're as hard as we've all been working, we're still at the precipice of this emerging industry that is going to continue to grow. And there is so much wealth creation that's possible.
Yes.
And one of our goals is to make sure that wealth creation is also equally shared, right? That is not sort of we don't repeat some of the sort of monopolization that we've seen in some other industries, but that there are opportunities for entrepreneurship and ownership that's different.
Yes.
So very briefly, because we're now 8 seconds over time.
So I think at this point I would like to mention that renewable energy sector is really growing, and the earthday.org theme for next year in fact is our power our planet, and which means we need trained workforce. So the more we have training in place, there are so many ample opportunities that are available even in the renewable energy sector. So yes, training, climate education, getting climate education into the NDCs is really the way forward. Because like they say that the future is either green or not at all.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed.
Just making a little bit of a switch here. According to the International Energy Agency, the investments in clean energy needs to be ramped up to roughly $4.5 trillion per year by 2030. And that is about 3 times the level that it is at now. And that might sound like a lot of money, but when you consider that we invest roughly $7 trillion per year in fossil subsidies, we do have money to spend in another direction, right? And much of that money, the $7 trillion are coming from pension funds and other institutional investments. So the question is, how do we redirect those investments to be a force of good, to support the climate transition instead of opposing the climate transition? And what we're going to talk about in this session is, can banks rid themselves of funding gas, oil, and coal? Truly, can they do that? And what say, if any, do regular, normal, standard people in general have in this transition? Earlier this year, we don't have time, together with our partners, we launched the campaign MoveTheMoney, which was shedding light on specifically this. How can people look at where their money goes, their pension funds and other investments, so they do not inadvertently support climate, the slowing down of climate transition, and support fossil fuels. So here to talk about this link between banking and finance, we have some prominent guests. And with me here in the studio I have Ariel Deranger, sorry, a French name originally. You're here, and you're Executive Director, Indigenous Climate Action. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And with us on Zoom, I have 3 guests. I have Ivan Frischberg, Chief Sustainability Officer of Amalgamated Bank. Great to have you with us. And also on Zoom, Jaco Minar, you are Chief Commercial Officer at Triodos Bank. Most welcome to join us also, of course. And last but not least, we have Anderson Lee. you're a research associate at World Resource Institute. So, we're ready to go. I'd like to start with you, Jaakko. Last year, Triodos was the first bank to join the global campaign calling for the treaty to phase out fossil fuels. Why was this important for you to join this campaign?
Yeah, Katarina, thank you very much. Well, there's so many levels to answer this question, because it starts, of course, with a personal conviction that this is the right thing to do, and that we all should do our utmost to make it happen. But if we take a step back, I think what we have now is lots of green agreements. We have lots of green regulation and green policies, which describe sometimes in a lot of detail what you should do when you want to do something positive with green investments. And what is lacking is that we have the same in terms of what you are not allowed to do on brown investment. And so we need a plan to phase out fossil fuel. This, as far as I'm concerned, is the missing link in terms of what we're looking at the total scene. Here at Triodos, we try to be a front runner. So in the Netherlands, we financed the first windmill back in the 80s, and we are still, according to Clean Energy Pipeline, the largest financial institution that finances renewable energy and clean technology. So for us, it is a really logical link because we believe in this transition, and it aligns with how we make our business. But banks cannot do it alone. It is always a interaction with society at large and with governments. So in this case, we need an intergovernmental agreement that basically not says we stop fossil fuel tomorrow, because that's not the argument, but that is very clear how we are going to phase it out, and then we will push to do it as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Jaakko. So, in report after report, banks are being called out not to adhere to the urgency here. What would it take, and what is it? Why is it that not other banks follow suit, follow your example that you're leading on here?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because I think one of the most prominent reports was BankTrack that basically said that since Paris and since we all committed to the 1.5 degrees, we've seen 6.9 trillion in financing from the 150 largest banks. So it's still ongoing, and a really big problem. I think maybe let's start on the positive side. I think banks like Triodos, but also banks like Amalgamated, that we'll talk later, and many other banks are showing that it can be done. So I mentioned that we were the first to become active in renewable energy, but we now see that it is almost mainstream. So we've also moved on to different technologies in that space because we want to remain a front runner. So you do see that there is some following happening. So one of the things that has to be done is that it takes people to give the example, so that others can follow. But if you look then at the banks, then they have a relatively short-term focus. The risks of climate, they look at not at the long term in terms of how it should be done. So we also need to create a framework together where everybody is going to look not just at short-term risk and return, but really longer-term look at both impact, risk, and return. And when I talk about return, I talk about the total return that includes the positive impact that you have. For Triodos, big, at least the ambition is to be very big. A negative impact that we all have. You still need materials that are dug up sometimes in places that we really don't like. We have to change that. So minimize our negative impact and then still have a solid financial return. And my ambition is that banks like us, are the best in terms of that total return. Positive impact plus minus the negative impact plus the financial return.
Thank you for emphasizing the looking at the bigger picture here. So Ivan, I'd like to turn to you. What is your take on the role of banks in creating a sustainable future? I mean, it's a big question, but give us your top thoughts, please.
All right, thank you. It's great to be here, Jaakko. It's good to see you again. I think I'll start from where Jaakko was talking. We obviously banks have invested incredible amounts of money into the fossil fuel industry and are very tied to the fossil fuel industry. And they are also now investing, huge amounts of money into clean energy. I mean, at Amalgamated Bank, it's about 40% of our lending and select investments is going into climate solutions. And I think anybody inside the banking industry is sort of looking for those opportunities. But if we don't look at what the problem is, i.e. fossil fuels, and address the massive amount of fossil fuels that are in production and are in the supply pipeline, we're not going to be able to solve the climate crisis. And we know we're well beyond 2 degrees as our trajectory right now. So the question for banks is, can they just walk away from that sector if the economies don't move in that direction? Or do they use their political muscle, their political capital, so to speak, to help move it in that direction? Because you can't really have an enormous imbalance between where the economy is and where finance is, right? They really are reflective of each other and serve each other. And one of the things that we see with respect to fossil fuels is, even in the COP process, it really doesn't get mentioned so much. I go to climate conferences and talk about climate all day long, and people don't talk about fossil fuels. And so what the treaty does is say, this is time for governments to step up and do their part. To first put a limit on how we expand fossil fuels. We can't keep digging the hole that we're in. Second is to have a fair phase out. Not everybody has to phase out at the same pace and time, and different economies have a different place in the timelines here. And then finally, to make sure that the transition is just and fair to people and to economies, particularly those that did not create the problem and suffer the most from it. So the treaty does that, and it really is an effort to say to governments and to policymakers, we need a plan to transition away from fossil fuels, just as the process, the COP process said last time. And we as banks, Triodos, Amalgamated, now 25 banks inside the Global Alliance for Banking on Values have all stepped up to say, we support that. We're going to lean in and use our insights into the banking sector, into the climate crisis, to call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, and that's why we're here today.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Ivan. Turning now to you, Ariel, you are challenging in your home territory in Canada the expansion of fossil fuel extraction, and what is needed for your communities in terms of financial support to make this transition away from fossil fuels possible?
I think that a lot of the points that have been made by the previous speakers are very, very true. We have been investing so deeply in the fossil fuel infrastructure in places in my territories in northern Alberta, in the Treaty 8 territories of many Indigenous communities. And what we first need to do is be talking about how we can phase out of these systems that have caused irreparable harm, not just to communities, but to ecosystems, and have exacerbated the climate crisis. And it has to be done in an equitable, fair way. But we can't just phase out of those industries in that area and leave and create economic deserts as well as energy deserts that are happening already. And so we have to be talking about a just and equitable transition that looks at where the financial sector has a role to play. And this comes at how do we improve not just moving funds towards renewable energy sectors, but how do we improve the risk analysis to ensure that this just transition that's being financed by both the public and the private sector includes analysis for human rights and the rights of Indigenous communities to ensure that we're getting a fair share of the finance and resources to build that transition, that it is moving towards energy systems and models that aren't going to further exacerbate the historical harms and wrongdoings that have been done by this industry for the last few hundred years. And from there, I think we'll start to see how the roles of banks is setting the stage. They can start adopting principles and processes right now that look at a equitable just transition that includes both human rights and the rights of Indigenous peoples in how we not just finance this just transition, but how we ensure we're doing it in an equitable and fair way. And I'm really excited because our communities are really just chomping at the bit to find real access to resources to build that renewable energy future that is aligned with our values and protects our ecosystems and our cultures.
Well, thank you very much, Ariel, indeed. So turning to you, Anderson, tell us about WRI and your work to shift the financial flows from dangerous activities to activities that actually sustain life instead of destroy life. Please share your some thoughts about your work, and also if you'd like to reflect on what Ariel just said about the indigenous communities.
Sure. Yes. Yes. Thanks for having me. And I can give a little bit of a background of WRI. It is a think tank, but also has a pretty sizable operations on doing implementation regarding exactly what Ivan, Jaco, and all the panelists have been saying. The just transition towards protecting people, climate, and nature. So we are looking at how the transition can really incorporate all the aspects of protecting climate, protecting nature, but also people, so that the just aspect is not forgotten. And I specifically work researching the finance, sustainable finance from the private sector, so banks, asset managers, asset owners. And regarding this topic, we've been doing research on tracking the net zero commitments by banks. We've done recent research published regarding looking at from a framework and 17 indicators how banks are faring regarding their net zero commitments. So specifically on their fossil fuel policies, what we see is there has been some progress over the years. So more banks, I think, seeing examples from leading banks such as Amalgamated, Triodos, and others, La Banque Postale, they have incorporated some of their policies to exclude some of fossil fuel financing in their exclusionary policies. So you can see that they now are, some of banks are excluding financing in the Amazon forest or on the Arctic or on ultra deep water offshore oil and gas exploration. So some progress has been coming over the years. I think thankfully in large part from pressure from civil society. But at the same time, you see that progress is not fast enough. Especially, this speaks to some of the points that the panelists have mentioned. A lot of these policies from the banks are tied to their national economies. So for example, Canadian banks, they have exclusionary policies for for Amazon or deep water exploration, but not exactly on tar sands, because that's where the oil and gas industry is heavily influencing or strong in the Canadian economy. Similarly, in the US, you don't see a lot of exclusionary policies on fracking. They might have some on the Amazon. So you can see a little bit of a pick and choose from the banks in terms of their financing exclusionary for oil and gas. So I think as it was alluded to, the banking sector is closely tied to how the economies of the national economies of these countries are set, the political economy. So as countries develop their policies and change their energy mix, the financing of the banks would also be transitioning towards phasing out fossil fuels and moving more towards renewable energy resources.
Thank you, Anderson. So Jaco and Ariel, and also, of course, Ivan, this dissonance that Anderson is pointing out here between policies when it comes to investing, for instance, in the Amazon and also in your own, not cleaning up in your own backyard. What are your thoughts about this? Jaco.
Yeah, so let me go first. Yeah, I'm inclined to also react to all of the things that were said before, because I think they were very valuable points. So let me just say that I think we need to do many things, and I'll get to the policies very soon. One is, I think the citizen sort of look on this is very important. In a country like the Netherlands, although we are also polarizing, 70 to 80% of the population still wants to take more action on climate. And so there is that popular sort of belief that that really has to happen. We have recently initiated a citizen initiative, which in the coming weeks we actually managed to get the number of signatures that you have, where we're going to the parliament to actually advocate for the changes that I'm going to talk about. And then those changes that have to happen is, of course, what Ivan and I talked about, the long-term plan to phase out fossil fuels. But if we look at the elements in there, and you mentioned some as well, Katrina, yeah, we currently have more fossil fuel subsidies than we have green subsidies. So there is a lack of incentives. And so in terms of what we tax and what we incentivize, we don't get the system right today. And that, I think, is what has to change.
Thank you very much. Please add on.
Yeah, I would just add, instead of reflecting on Anderson's point, banks are very reflective of their home countries, right? And so Jocko and Triodos reflect, I think, incredible leadership on climate change, because that's something that's widely held within the Netherlands. The Dutch people are focused on this issue, and they have a long track record of leadership. And then, but you look around these countries, you say Canada, heavily invested in oil, tar sands, oil and gas coming from there, or the US with its coal, oil, gas, you know, the largest exporter of gas and oil in the world. You know, we have a problem with many of these producing countries being really very much tied at the government level to a fossil fuel industry. And the banks reflect that. And so however they operate, the big ones globally, they still reflect a lot of those politics and those policies. And until we have a way to break apart the kind of addiction to fossil fuels and the interdependencies between some of these producing governments and the industry, it's going to be hard to really get the banking industry to kind of follow suit. I think if we do that, if we do something like the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, and we can enact that at a country, a country level, then you will start to see banks head in that direction as well. They have great incentive to, because in many ways they carry the financial risk that's associated with failure on climate. But it's going to be very hard to break that alliance without some sort of global structure and global agreement to actually limit, phase out, and manage that just transition for fossil fuels.
Thank you. I have one final question, and it goes out to all four of you, and you have about 2 minutes each to answer it. So it's about, I mean, we have the treaty, which is, of course, is a fantastic tool that I have much faith in. But what other policy regulations or other structures in terms of frameworks, the financial sector, would you like to see to move this further on? I'd like to start with you, Ariel.
Well, I think some of the negotiations here in Azerbaijan are really focusing on climate finance. And while the bulk of the conversation is looking at public finance for climate finance, there is a strong move towards the need to pull the private sector in because of just how much power they have in influencing a true just transition. And so we don't just need to be talking about having agreements on how the public funds need to be driven for this just transition, but where is the public sector's responsibility, and how are we ensuring that there aren't exclusionary policies that create what many of people in my community call sacrifice zones. And so we need to ensure that the policies that we create both here in Azerbaijan and in the public sector ensure that there's a reflection of both a human rights-based approach and indigenous rights-based approach. And we have to see this being developed through things like going beyond the precautionary principles, going beyond the equator principles, going beyond the sustainability principles, and really seeing a drive for how we can equalize both the human rights, the needs of our economies, and the ecosystems protection that we are all striving for here. So this is going to take a lot of work. That is going to be an outcome of some of the negotiations here in Paris, but the responsibility is going to be on the public sector or the private sector to adopt these policies internally to really drive us home to a true just transition.
Thank you very much, Ariel. Anderson, please continue. Your thoughts on policies and frameworks.
Sure. Yeah, one framework that I think would be helpful for both in terms of policies for banks, but also for bank clients, is to think of both of the fossil fuel supply, but also the fossil fuel demand. So that's where we can really make a dent in fossil fuel financing, and then eventually on fossil fuel demand and supply. So on the supply, I'll just note that although a lot of these bank financing is very contingent on domestic policies, national economies, the divestment or foreclosing bank lending to companies, there is evidence. There's a Harvard Business School study that shows that when banks stop lending for some coal companies, that increased their funding costs and then eventually led to some early retirement of coal plants. So I think there's definitely movement and work that needs to be done regarding continuing the pressure for banks to include more of stopping financing of activities that are not aligned to net zero, but also on looking at the fossil fuel demand. So banks should also take into consideration their financing towards, for example, auto manufacturers that are still producing internal combustion engines that really drive a lot of the fossil fuel demand that in turn drives the fossil fuel supply from the oil and gas companies. So banks that are engaging with their clients to have transition plans, to move their business models away from fossil fuel the economy towards the new net zero economy. I think when clients are looking for banks, I think that should be also one area to look into.
Thank you, Anderson. And Jaakko, and let's go with you, Jaakko. We have 4 minutes and 40 seconds. So you split it up between the two of you.
Well, I think first I want to underline a point that was just made before, is that indeed we have to engage the private sector, because that is where ultimately all the money is. Governments can go only so far if they try to do things directly. So they are much more effective if they can create ways to actually attract private sector funding. And I think if you look at these type of agreements, I think the fossil fuel sector is now fighting against it, and even banks are sometimes fighting against it a bit. But I think those banks now have assets on their books that show relatively large volatility, and going forward that will only become bigger. So I think if we don't say let's stop tomorrow, but if we actually create a feasible plan, then it creates also some level of stability going forward, and even a level playing field if we do it with maybe not all countries in the world, but a sizable number of them.
Thank you very much. Ivan.
I think the missing player here in many ways is the central banking system and the supervisors that are focused on stewardship of the economy and avoiding systemic risks. We are hurtling towards catastrophe, a climate disruption that any economy will not be able to survive. And a lot of the regulators that supervise banks, that supervise the economy, are really behind the curve in thinking about what they can do to avoid that risk. And so there's work being done within the network for greening the financial system, which is a coalition of central banks, and certainly the European Central Bank and others have sort of led in this space to say, okay, we need to regulate and supervise the economy in a way that actually says, okay, the cost of capital for dirty industries is going to go up, and the cost of capital for the solutions we need is going to go down. There are places in the world that have set targets for financial firms on how much they have to dedicate to green lending. And so I think there's a lot that could be done if our banking system was really focused on risk at a regulatory level. They would be doing a lot more on climate change. And so that is one of the things that we're focused on. Unfortunately, we have a very tough road to hoe here in the United States, given the change in our government. But a lot, the best economies, the best democracies have an independent central bank, and so they have, I think, the opportunity and the space to be able to keep leading on this issue.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Ivan, and thank you, Jaakko and Anderson and Ariel, for sharing your profound insights on this topic here. This is key, and if you're watching this and you might wonder, what is my money doing at the bank? Please check out the Move the Money campaign, and to make sure that your investments are not supporting the fossil fuel havoc, and the havoc that the fossil fuels are creating, but instead supporting the transition here. So check out the Move the Money campaign. It's on our app, on our platform, the We Don't Have Time. And it's a collaboration between We Don't Have Time, the Non-Fossil Fuel Proliferation Treaty, and also the United Nations Development Program and the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. So we have a lot of signatories. You can go in and sign yourself and check it out and how you maneuver and move your money in the right direction. So we'll keep at it, and thanks again for our prominent guests here sharing your insights. Thank you, and bye-bye. Let's move on.
You're not going to be here now. No.
So, we are just going to begin this session with a wonderful film made today at COP29 by our roving photographer, filmmaker, Carl Emroth. If we could just screen that, that would be absolutely super.
The key topic for this year's COP is the new goal on finance, which we are set to decide as a follow-up to the current $100 billion goal, which we set already in Copenhagen in 2009. So the new goal is a successor to that, and what we are here to decide on is, amongst other things, the volume of that new goal, but also who will be contributing to the new goal, and sort of the general setup of the new goal.
No country is immune. So let's dispense with the idea that climate finance is charity. An ambitious new climate finance goal is entirely in the self-interest of every single nation, including the largest and the wealthiest.
We need the whole support. Nigeria needs the whole support going on in the agricultural sector, in every sector of Nigeria. We need support so that if Nigeria is stable, the world is stable. I can tell you that for free.
Nigeria is also the second country in Africa to have a climate change act. Bring in private sector, bring in public funding, and bring in multilaterals, combination of finance to be able to drive adaptation actions, adaptation strategies, and ideas, and also mitigation as well.
One of the big issues today is trillions of dollars that is needed to address climate action. And to unlock that trillion, you don't need trillions to unlock trillions. You actually need a fraction of that to essentially create enough of confidence in markets such that investors are able to crowd in. So even with a $10 million guarantee, you could be looking at unlocking around $150, $200 million of investment simply because you have that $10 million guarantee in place.
From a Swedish perspective, we're part of the EU negotiating team, and as the EU, we want to see a certain outcome for all these various agenda items. So our job is to sort of to make sure that these texts are as forward-leaning, as ambitious as possible, and presenting again the kind of solutions that we see are available to accelerate the transition globally as guidance then to all the different countries who are here. This is what we can do to accelerate climate action globally.
Great. Well, that was a super film showing some of the things going around here at COP by our wonderful roving videographer and filmmaker Carl Enroth. We're now going to go to another exciting session here, and this is a Move the Money section on investor matchmaking. Look, travel is a major source of emissions. We know that for many companies. We will now meet a company that offers an innovative solution to this problem. Goodwings is using its climate tech software to accelerate the decarbonization of travel by enabling companies to align their businesses' travel with their overall sustainability goals. If you're an investor, stay tuned because this company is currently raising money and poses to become a profitable climate tech investment opportunity. With us on Zoom, the magic of Zoom, we have Christian Müller-Holst, who's the CEO and founder of Goodwings. Hi there, Christian. Great. Are we hearing Christian from... I think you have to unmute Christian, maybe.
I unmuted now.
You are unmuted now. We all love saying that, don't we, to people? You are muted. Anyway, you are not muted now, which is fantastic. Can you give us your keynote, please?
I can do so. Thank you very much. COP29 reminds us that we must do everything in our powers to reverse climate change as human beings, but also as business professionals. So the question is, can you serve both planet and business at the same time? Can you be both profitable and sustainable? And can you as a business travel provider decouple your revenue from your clients' emissions? The question is yes. The answer is yes. Business travel is currently undergoing seismic changes, not only in the distribution of travel content being disrupted, such as airline tickets, hotel and rail connections, but business traveler expectations of user experience and flexibility is changing faster than the industry, and this creates friction. At the same time, businesses are met with new climate regulation, but also stakeholder expectations. You need to accurately, consistently measure your business travel emissions, but in fact, you need to go well beyond that. You need to set reduction targets and deliver emissions reductions. And overall, you need to align your business travel with your company-wide sustainability goals. You need to, in other words, manage your business travel as professionally as the rest of your business. And businesses are realizing that now. For that reason, the demand for a future fit and forward-looking business travel solution is on the rise. And we at Goodwings are meeting that demand head on. And in many ways, we're leading the change. Goodwings is a next generation travel management company with its unique sustainability functionality. Our solution combines the best of three worlds: software, service, and sustainability. Spotnana's online booking tool, which enables travelers to book, change, cancel without having to call agents, ensures up to 95% online adoption. The tool connects to your HR expense systems and provides out-of-box reporting and traveler safety measures. Secondly, we offer white glove customer service by JTB, a company with more than 100 years of travel experience in offices and travel agents all over the world. No more calling a call center that cannot find your booking and cannot help you. And lastly, our own unique sustainability offering comprising advanced emissions management software that involves carbon target setting, allocation of carbon budgets to teams, departments, along with alerts and notifications, AI-powered emission predictions with scenario building and end-to-end reporting. On top of that, we provide access to sustainable aviation fuel at much affordable prices by allocating the majority of commissions we generate from our clients' booking to this purpose. Our approach to enable responsible business travel is this three-step approach: reduce emissions by enabling low emission behavior by making sustainable aviation fuel accessible and affordable, and to offset remaining emissions. No longer do responsible businesses need to compromise and choose between either software or service, let alone sustainability. We provide all three, and we're being recognized for it. This year alone, we've won 2 industry awards, Germany and the Netherlands. Newsweek recently ranked Goodwings as top 6 pick for business travel solutions in 2024. We have clients in more than 20 countries, and with constantly improving conversion rate, we're taking on the business travel sector one company at a time. Business travel emissions are back to pre-pandemic level, and the sector is expected to grow 7 to 8% every year. Therefore, I encourage you to invest in Goodwings and take part in accelerating the decarbonization of business travel and be part of a highly profitable business at the same time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. So, super. Thank you very much indeed, Christian, for that speech. And stay with us. And we're now going to welcome on the magic of Zoom Arve Johan Andersson, a board member and an investor in Goodwings. Hello. Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
Good to be with you.
Thank you very much. And in the studio, we have Ingmar Rentzhog, the CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time, who will co-moderate this discussion with me with his beady financial eye on these topics that are coming up here. Okay, so this is a kind of, we're going to chat about this, matchmaking chat, as some people call it. Ingmar, you've got a background in finance, right? And the finance industry. What questions come to mind when you hear Christian's presentation?
Many, but I would start with a basic one, and that is, how do you make money?
Well, we have a multi-stream revenue model. We have subscriptions from the companies that use our service. Then we, of course, generate a revenue or booking commissions every time a booking is comes through our platform. And then we have a whole stream of other kind of like bolt-on revenue streams that we can tap into to increase or enhance the travel experience, such as travel disruption, notifications, health and safety of travelers, etc. So we have several revenue streams.
Okay. And you are now having Arve Johan Andersson as your main investor in this round, I heard. And can you tell us a little bit about how you get together? What are you doing together besides investing in Goodwings, Arve?
Oh, good question for me. Well, I guess when you have an entrepreneur with the quality of Christian, experience tells you that it's a question of reining in the activities, so to speak. People like him, they are out to conquer the world and they want to do everything at the same time. But as an investor, you really want to focus on the key topics at the moment in order to sort of take one step at a time and limit the risk that you're taking on. So I guess Christian is doing all the thinking. I'm doing all the braking. I'm trying to rein him in and keeping, with his nose in the track, so to speak.
And how long have you invested? When did you first invest in the company?
Well, it's a few years ago now. It was actually pre-COVID. So we of course, like any other business that endured the COVID with the rest of the world, were challenged during that period when there was no travel. So, I've been there for a few years, but, in reality, since after COVID.
And have it developed as you expected, or are you happy?
Yeah, at this stage, I'm quite happy. It's taken us some time because we have created a completely new platform solution for business travel, and at this stage, I'm very happy. We have taken all the technical risk out. We have a platform that is operational. It's receiving bookings, and the bookings are increasing quickly. We're attracting customers due to the unique ESG functionality that we provide. So at the moment, the only thing that we are missing now is the last leg of financing before we enter a break-even phase.
And I heard that you have a new investor on board or soon to join in form of an industry investor, GTB. Christian, can you tell us a little bit about this new investor that will help you grow?
Yeah. Well, GTB is already an investor. They became part of Goodwings summer of 23, so 15 months ago. JTB is one of the world's largest travel companies. They're headquartered in Tokyo. It's a huge travel company with 20,000 employees. For us, it means that not only are they an investor in Goodwings, but they're also a close partner. So they're basically managing the fulfillment, the first line support to all our clients, because already at this early stage, we have more than 200 businesses from 20 countries who needs to be serviced in their local language, who needs to be billed in the local currency. So even though Goodwings is a relatively small company based in Copenhagen, we're ready to take on the world because there's no limitation in our capacity to sign up companies, whether in Turkey, Australia, Canada, or Sweden for that matter. So JTB is a close partner of ours and has been for the past year or so.
And for this finance round you're raising now, they are a corner investor. What is you raising currently?
So right now we're raising a pre-Series A of 3 million euros, which in theory will take us to a point of break even. We will consider then raising a Series A either at time of break even or perhaps before that if we can continue to demonstrate the same level of momentum and traction that we have right now. JTB, well, I mean, if you're asking whether they want to invest further, I think that question should be directed to them. But my gut feeling and the indications that we get from JTB is they're very, very positive with the position we have established in the market, the level of traction. Remember, travel is very much business as usual. Everybody is offering the same somewhat commoditized service. I think we have put together truly the best solution available, software service and sustainability. And we can see that it's materializing in terms of acquisition and adoption of clients. So JTB, from my understanding, is a very happy investor and most likely will want to increase their engagement in Goodwings in the coming years.
Will JTB also help you get more clients on board among their other companies in the group?
That is definitely something that we're looking into. JTB is mainly in APAC and Americas. They're not as strong in Europe. Our main markets are currently 4 regions in Northern Europe. So UK, Ireland, DAC, North region, and Benelux. That's where we see most of the traction, really, because there is a huge demand now from the CSRD, the EU directive that enforces companies of a certain size to disclose their emissions, including Scope 3, but also because there is a willingness to pay. There is a willingness to pay slightly more for a subscription that actually enables the company to take these steps towards decarbonizing and not just continuing increase year on year.
And who is the companies that you see are demanding your service where you have a better fit than the competitors?
Well, our ideal customer profile is a medium-sized company. I would say anywhere between 50 and 5,000 FTEs in those markets. We're relatively industry agnostic. I think we have clients in more than 50 different industries. But with now that we have, more publicly gone out and told the world that we're working closely with JTB and that our clients actually leverage the global range of JTB's organization, that means that we're getting a lot of interest from enterprise-sized clients that we usually would not have targeted ourselves because the sales cycles tend to be relatively longer than in the mid-market. In the mid-market, we're down to an average of 21 days from lead to closing the deal, which is unheard of in our industry. Of course, the larger companies, it's a different sell. It's usually RFPs and RFIs, and it usually takes up to 12 months. But we have won the first very big client, and it looks like we will have a handful or more within the next 3 to 4 months.
And as I understand your platform, because I actually tested it, We Know Time is one of your your customers. It's a great platform where you can not only book your travel and you get the best alternative, you see the carbon emission, you also get the accounting, so you get the data. And I think with the CSRD and where you have a regulation where you need to show this data not only to your stakeholders but also to all the companies you're doing business with, I think you will have a great market there. So I have a question for you, Arve. You're previously a general partner at Northzone, one of the most successful venture funds in the Nordics. With your investment background, what makes Goodwings stand out?
Well, I mean, as an investor, you always want to find a huge market that is ready and ripe for change. You don't want to be in a situation where you need to create demand. You want to tap into a demand situation that is attractive. And business travel is huge. The economics of business travel is well known, but business travel has to change, right? Business travel must reduce its climate impact. And Goodwings is an innovative platform and an approach to drive behavioral change among the employees, in addition to the SAF and the other offsetting things that we offer. So for me, Goodwings is something quite rare in the impact space, so to speak. A lot of investors have been looking for companies that actually can create impact and make money too. And this is what is the attraction for me with Goodwings as an investor. I mean, yes, impact is necessary, but there is no impact without a business in the future, because it has to be funded, and without a good return on investment, you won't be able to find the funds. So, for me, Goodwings is exactly that. What it is, it's creating impact and making money at the same time.
And regarding making money, how much money are Goodwings making? Are you profitable yet, or soon to be?
We're pre-break even. We have never been as well placed as we are right now in terms of seeing the road to profitability. Predictability in sales and all the commercial aspects of the business, not only bringing in new clients, but also getting them to use the platform, the adoption phase is really getting ironed out. So we will be profitable within the next 12 to 15 months with the current team and the current cost base. So the question is, how fast do we want to go? The total addressable market, as Arve touched a little bit upon, is enormous, and it's only progressing in our favor, because more and more companies will be impacted by the CSRD, and climate regulation will also, at some given point in time, grow out of Europe and be the standard globally. So I think we're quite well placed to take a big chunk of the market and have a big impact on travel emissions globally.
That sounds very exciting. How can we find you if we have a lot of money here and want to invest?
Well, Ingmar, you have my cell phone number, so you
I have, but I'm talking about the people tuning in to this broadcast.
If anyone listening, reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a personal message, or reach out to the Goodwings team on goodwings.com. Don't be shy. Let's have a talk, and let's see where we can take off together.
Thank you so much, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Ingmar.
So, welcome to the final session of the day, where we try to wrap up what's happened at the COP during the day, certainly from our perspective.
And we have a lot of great guests during our sessions here. But let's start by connecting to Stockholm. So, what's going on in Stockholm? How are you tonight? And what are your thoughts from this watching and participating in the COP today from the Stockholm perspective?
Hello, Nick and Katarina. Thank you for a great show. Yeah, I can go first.
You go first. Thanks for a wonderful show today. You first, David.
No, it's been lovely to follow the discussions from COP. I think it's really up and running now. And the discussion on data centers and energy efficiency, I think, was very illuminating that we had earlier on. Particular something Thomas Spencer of the IEA said about data centers, AI being a bit two-faced. You have, on the one hand, enormous footprint from the calculations being made, but you also have vastness, a richness of opportunity in terms of how we can enable the transition through solutions powered by AI. So, and my key takeaway, my reflection from that is that we need to regulate not only the risk with AI, but also its footprint. So in this build-out, we need strict rules in order to make it as energy efficient as possible. And here, using it for district heating is one of the solutions that we so discussed. But on the flip side, and on the more fun side of that, I think we need to really connect AI innovators with the global climate community and environmental innovators, and create incentives to really push the transformation through AI. It's sad to see that the exponential transformation that is really powering AI now, it's really the exponential transformation in terms of climate solutions that we need to see, but maybe the two can be married in the future.
Let's certainly hope for that. And this was David Olson, co-founder and CEO of We Don't Have Time. And over to Christina Karlmark, you are business partnership manager at We Don't Have Time. So what are your thoughts?
Yes. I have a short reflection on the same panel regarding energy efficiency. And at the last COP, we said we need to double it by 2030. And it's only been 1% better last year, so we need to speed it up. And in one of these sessions, the panels we had, there was a dialogue. You asked a question, Nick, actually, to the panelists, who's going to drive, who's going to be in the driving seat? Is it going to be private or public in regards to shifting how we do the build-out of all these server halls? And I would say it could be the IT customer, because if the IT customer puts demands on where they buy their data, they could push for local, resilient data centers that are actually servicing the district heating. So let's go for the customer, pushing for a faster change.
Thank you, Christina.
Yeah, I just want to say I thought that whole session was interesting, because I thought it was fascinating that the EU does not really still value heat, and that the huge scale of heat being wasted in Europe and also the United States, it's not peanuts, right? This is a huge resource of wasted energy and thus wasted emissions into the atmosphere, which don't need to be there. And there needs to be some stepping up on valuing heat in the EU and in the USA and elsewhere. If that's not going to happen, it's... And the other elephant in the room is the guy in Hamburg. I asked the question. You're getting your heat for the district heating from a copper processing factory.
Smelting, yeah.
What happens if that closes down? And he went, yeah, that's a bit of a problem. So there are these kind of uncertainties in the heat story, and they need to be dealt with, right? Otherwise, we're going to continue to waste it.
Well, thank you very much, Christina and David from Stockholm. Today is one of the days of the COP, which is the Finance COP, dubbed the Finance COP, of course, and the outcome of these negotiations will largely define if the COP will be a success or a failure, as every year. From what we have learned, the tensions are high in the negotiation rooms. Individual countries between north and south, etc., etc., and looks like we're going to have pretty much of a bumpy road ahead in this COP, which is of course fairly expected. But most people do agree on is that we need desperately to move the money here. We need to move the money, and we need to move them fast and to be able to cut the emissions at the speed that is required to make this transition. So let's now invite two guests who are going to talk a little bit more about this. Ingmar Rentzhog. Ingmar Rentzhog, please join me here in the studio. And also we have with us Ilka Demirdag, Head of Global Events Top Tier Impact. So please join us, Ingmar and Ilke. So grab a seat and grab a hand microphone. I need to adjust my headset because I think it'll slid off here in the rush of changing moderators. See if this is better. Excellent. So Ilke, for those of you who do not know what you do at Top Tier Impact, please tell them.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity. Top Tier Impact is a global ecosystem for impact investors and innovators. We have more than 50 chapters globally, and we try to actually bring impact investing and sustainability to the mainstream.
Excellent, excellent. So, Ingmar, finance is a topic that is very, very dear to you, and it's also the topic here at the COP. Please tell the audience a little bit more about the Move the Money campaign, those that might have missed this campaign.
Yes, so Move the Money campaign is something we launched earlier this year together with UNDP, Exponential Roadmap and the Non-Fossil Fuel Proliferation Treaty. And it's all about that in order to make it, in order to scale all those solutions, we need more impact investors. We need to move the money, because what people don't know, and we have the money. It's just that the money is invested today in the old fossil fuel economy. I could make an example. The global pension funds all over the planet, pension money or money that we give to the institutions that they invest, and in the future they're going to give it back when we need them. There's an NGO out there that we on Time are collaborating with. It's a website called Invest in Climate Cows. There you can look up exactly where this money are going, and they have a counter, and that counter is now up to $5.1 trillion are invested in fossil fuel companies. $5 trillion, that's 5% of all money that goes around in the world. So it's a huge amount. And the interesting part, according to EIA, they have done a study, we need $4.5 trillion invested yearly in clean solutions. And if we get the money into the clean solutions, we will actually succeed with the Paris Agreement. And currently there's around $1 trillion invested yearly. So we're lacking 3.5 trillion. So okay, we have 5 trillion here, and we are lacking 3.5 trillion here. That's Move the Money all about. We really need to do this transition. We have the money, we need to move it.
Thank you, Ingmar. So Ilke, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm totally in line with Ingmar. We definitely need to really shift the money towards the right solutions, because when we look at the ecosystem, including the startup ecosystem to global corporates, we have the solutions. On the other hand, we have the capital, and we really need to make the capital move to the right kind of decisions for investments, where we have more impact for people and planet. And I think that's a great initiative. There was another initiative, which was launched at the beginning of the year in Davos for nature and biodiversity investments. I think that's a very important area as well. Nature itself is so regenerative. We don't need much more to really find new solutions. I mean, if we keep it or sustain it, it's more than enough to really meet the net zero targets. So we really need to focus on the right initiatives and the right mindset to channel capital towards right investments.
So Ilkay, you have a very interesting event here tomorrow here in
Yes.
Baku. Could you please tell the viewers about this?
Sure. I mean, this COP is all about finance, as you mentioned, and that's why we're going to be focusing on climate finance and regional collaboration in our event tomorrow. This is going to be bringing in asset managers, family offices, corporates, innovators, and policymakers, because we think, these complex problems can only be solved with stakeholder management, with really collaboration from all stakeholders. That's why we bring in all these decision makers, and we're a very action-oriented ecosystem. So we tend to, do these events not just for the sake of doing events, but we see so many synergies coming out of these events. Companies are formed, funds are getting more, capital. We see investments going into the startups, and that's why we want to focus on climate finance tomorrow and really discuss what do we need to close the gap to for climate finance, basically.
Thank you. And Ingmar, you're going to speak at this event tomorrow. What are you going to talk about?
Money.
Absolutely. More specifically.
I'm going to talk about what I just said,
Move the money campaign.
because it's one audience that really needs to hear it. It's the finance industry. And now I know that you will have a lot of people involved in the impact industry,
Exactly.
and they will like the message, but they don't know the big numbers that are still investing in fossil fuels. So people need to hear it. There's not lack of money. We have it. We just need to move it. But I will do one more thing. And that is a campaign we are part of, BuyMoreTime is part of, inspired by My Money Matters, and UK NGO that did a quite very funny film with Olivia Colman that is thanking the UK investors, pension investors, because they can celebrate in oil, because all their money goes into oil. And that created a big debate in UK about pension funds' role in the green transition. So there's a Swedish activist out there that have engaged a lot of organizations. BuyMoreTime has of course joined this, so that have made a Swedish version of this film, and we will have it English translated. And it's targeted the largest pension fund in Sweden, AP7. They invest billions of Swedish pension saving money. 5 million Swedes are saving into this fund because it's state-owned. And early this year, they were actually one of the largest investors in Saudi Aramco oil. Now they're not that anymore because we campaigned for it, but they're still heavily invested in fossil fuel. So we will show this short film, and it will be funny to see the audience react.
Thank you, Ingmar. We're looking forward to hearing the response from that event tomorrow. So Ilkay, what would your main arguments be for those that say that we really can't afford moving the money, we can't really afford the green transition? What do you say to them?
Well, I think finance and technology on its own is not enough to close this finance gap. We need the right intentions and consistency and dignity about how we deal with this. When people say we cannot do it, I don't buy this argument, because as your platform say, we don't have time. We're far behind the targets anyway, and we need a collaborated mindset to shift this towards the right attitude. And I think one more thing that I would like to add, about impact investing in general, there is this misconception that impact investing is like you're almost giving away your profit or the return. It's not the case. When you look at impact investment opportunities, because you have a better risk management, basically you actually get a better return on your impact investment opportunities as well. So this is not like giving away. This is while you're making your financial returns, really doing good for planet and people.
Thank you very much indeed. Ingmar, would you like to add? You have a long and strong track record from the finance business.
I agree. There's a lot of investment you can do there where you can make money and get impact. We just had this Goodwings on the show that is a perfect example of that. But I also see that it's not the full story, because many times those impact investment, those climate solutions and nature-based solution and environment solution you have there, they are often very, have a great potential in making a lot of money, but it often takes longer time. So if you want to do fast profit, you can invest in an oil company. But if you want to get money over time, you will lose money on oil company, and you will make money out of impact companies. But I think it's important to add that to this narrative around that impact investments, they are profitable, but it often takes longer time. And that's why it's so frustrating when you see those pension funds. Because pension funds, they are long-term investors. We're talking about 30, 40 years duration.
They should be able to have this perspective.
Exactly. If they can't have it, who can? I mean, if I'm saving to a beer next Friday, maybe investing in an impact is not the best choice for your wallet. It's the best choice for your future. But I mean, come on. We need to have the time perspective, and that's so frustrating. I don't know if you agree.
Of course, it looks like you definitely want to say
what
something.
you say. I just want to make an addition. I think the short-termism view is what brought us to where we are at the moment, and we really need a long-term view about how we actually value investments, how we make the investment decisions, and we definitely need patient capital to solve these problems, because some of the technologies that are offered, that could be very essential for the climate change, they need intensive capital, and that is patient capital as well. It's all both too much capital intensive, and it's a long-term capital. So we definitely need investors with a more long-term view.
Well, thank you very much, Ilke, and best of luck with your event tomorrow.
Thank you
for
very
you, and
much.
also for Ingmar, who's going to speak there. So thank you.
I had a lot of things I wanted to say in that session, but I didn't get a chance. I was looking forward to it. So tomorrow we will be back with another great day of climate broadcasting. We're going to invite expert guests again to talk about how to cut methane emissions under our campaign Buy More Time. And by the way, with Buy More Time, if you're interested in joining it in any way, you can go to wedon'thavetime.org and you'll find the website and you'll be able to sign up. We'll look also at exponential transition plans for net zero businesses, probably with our dear friends the Exponential Roadmap, I suspect, and how to create a blueprint for green telecoms, and hear about positive tipping stories on energy and transport, and much more.
Always much more. We have quite a full day and rich day tomorrow, and we're going to finish this day with the song "I Want to Be Cool," and it will be followed by a very special weather report. So thank you for now, and please tune in tomorrow again.
I want to be cool, it isn't a joke. To walk in the woods, without all the smoke. I love to swim, but not in a flood. We can't grow a crop, down in the mud. I want to be cool and get the job done, so we don't get left out to bake in the sun. Let's plant some trees and make some shade. From the ground up, that's how change is made. I want to be cool, how about you? Together there's not one single thing that we couldn't do. Take care of the earth and each other too. Working together, we all can be cool. I want to be cool, it's gotten too hot. I'm joining the movement to save what we've got. So every and find some joy. I wanna be cool, how about you? Together there's not one single thing that we couldn't do. Take care of the earth and each other too. Working together, we all can be cool. Leaders, it's time to lead. Listen to your people in need. The whole world is sweating this out. Can't you hear your kids starting to shout? I wanna be cool, how about you? Together there's not one single thing that we couldn't do. Take care of the earth and each other too. Working together, we all can be cool. I wanna be cool, how about you? Together there's not one single thing that we couldn't do. Take care of the earth and each other too. Working together, working together, working together. We all can be cool. I wanna be cool. I wanna be cool.
سيدتي سادتي، نشكركم على الحضور معنا في نشرة جوية استثنائية. أنا غالية سلمي، المقدمة متاع النشرة. من الشمال إلى الجنوب ومن الجنوب إلى الشمال، المناخ مش قاعد يتقدم. تخيلوا معايا وضعيتي وانا كبيرة، جفاف، سخانة، حرق غابات. تحبوني نكمل؟ خوفتكم. هذا الكل شي كلفنا برشا. في 2050 الانحباس الحراري شي كلفنا 600,000 مليار دولار. هذا الكل متسبب فيه التلوث اللي قاعد يسخن في الجو. فما حلول نستعملوا فيها الطاقات المتجددة، وتعرفوا اللي الطاقة الشمسية تكلف أقل من المحروقات. سيدتي سيدتي، كان ما نتحركوش باش نخسروا برشا. هذه بالنسبة ليكم نشرة جوية، بالنسبة لينا مستقبلنا.